Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosie O'Brien-Boytek, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director for the Connecticut Association of Schools. We're excited to once again partner with the Connecticut State Department of Education and SERC to bring you this summit. On behalf of all of us, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Education Equity Summit, Part 3, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion from Different Perspectives. We have an exciting program for you this morning. In fact, I personally think this is going to be the best Education Equity Summit yet, because we will be hearing from key educational stakeholder groups who have come together this morning to share their perspectives on critically important issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll begin this morning with Connecticut State Department of Education Deputy Commissioner of Academics and Innovation, Desi Nesmith, who will provide opening remarks for the summit. We'll also hear from Danbury Superintendent Kevin Walton, CAS 2020 Middle Level Principal of the Year from West Hartford, Joy Wright, and 2022 Connecticut Teacher of the Year from Mansfield, Kim King. We're very excited to present the perspectives from two distinguished panels, the first consisting of Connecticut DEI directors and coordinators, and the second bringing us voices of several of Connecticut High School CAS Equity Board committee members from across the state. Finally, we'll be showcasing three schools: Fairfield Ludlow High School, Rogers Park Middle School, and Benjamin Franklin School during our School Spotlight series. If we as a state are going to make a difference, we need to continue to listen, learn, and grow together. Again, we're thrilled to be able to share the perspectives from various stakeholders across Connecticut with the goal of developing a shared definition, vocabulary, and common understanding of what DEI means, one that leads us to a statewide vision of acceptance and respect for diversity, equity, justice, and a more inclusive society. It's been almost a year since our CAS Education Equity Committee was formed, and since that time, the committee has worked passionately and relentlessly to make these summits meaningful and purposeful, and to provide a springboard for moving our best thinking and best practices forward. On July 20th, 2021, the CAS Education Equity Committee adopted the following statement that has been the impetus for our work this past year. As a reminder for why we're here today, I would like to read it to you. The Education Equity Committee at the Connecticut Association of Schools shares an unwavering commitment to reflecting, acknowledging, and adjusting beliefs and actions around equity through the lens of race, culture, and identity. We believe that each student's strengths, diversity, and culture are assets, and we aim to foster empathy, awareness, and advocacy in every school stakeholder. We strive to cultivate inclusivity in our schools and communities within Connecticut, as well as at a national and global level. We will collaborate to provide opportunities for educators to explore and delve deeper into understanding the barriers that contribute to educational inequity. The Equity Summit is a springboard for creating, supporting, and sustaining equitable schools across a continuum of starting points and understandings by transforming systems and beliefs to ensure cultural competence and racial and social justice. We stand in solidarity with the Connecticut State Department of Education, which in its 5-year comprehensive plan stated, quote, "Where equity is the mindset, equality is the result. All our children, regardless of their circumstances, deserve an excellent education that helps them reach high standards of performance. The key to unlocking that potential in every child is ensuring that he or she is embraced in a culture of high expectations and learns from great teachers in a great school run by great leaders." At this time, I would like to thank our CAS Education Equity Committee members for their time, energy, passion, insight, and thought-provoking conversations. They've worked diligently behind the scenes to design our third Education Equity Summit to continue the critically important ongoing dialogue and professional learning with and among educators and stakeholders across Connecticut. Please join me in thanking the CAS Education Equity Committee members for all they do. Once again, on behalf of all of us at CAS, CSDE, and SERC, and especially the CAS Education Equity Committee, we are excited to welcome you to our third Education Equity Summit and very glad that you're joining us today. If you missed our first and second summits, all of those sessions are posted on the CAS website as well. We hope you'll share the link with your colleagues and friends, view them at your leisure, and use them as a professional learning tool for yourself and those that you work with in your school communities. The Education Equity Summit Committee wants to hear from you, so we will be dropping the link to our brief evaluation survey into the chat and posting it on the screen several times throughout the summit. We greatly appreciate your feedback and thank you in advance for completing the survey before you leave the summit today. We also would like to gratefully acknowledge our wonderful corporate partners, Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence, Connecticut Army National Guard, the Department of Transportation, Horace Mann, Jostens, Connecticut Lighting Centers, MCM Fundraising, and Pullman and Cumley LLC for helping to make this webinar possible. We thank them for their continuing support of our professional learning opportunities for principals and educators in Connecticut. Again, I would like to welcome all of you who are joining us today to our third Education Equity Summit. As we continue on our equity journey, we are excited to increase our knowledge, hone our skills, find our voices, share our stories, and actively engage in critical conversations to move our schools, our districts, and our entire state forward. Thank you all for joining us today. It's now my pleasure to introduce one of Education Equity Committee members, Chair of the CAS Elementary Board of Control, and the principal of Oswegatchie Elementary School in Waterford, Connecticut, Joe Macrino, who will introduce our first speaker. Please join me in welcoming Joe Macrino.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your time. It is an honor to introduce Desi Nesmith, Deputy Commissioner of Academics and Innovation at the Connecticut State Department of Education, a Windsor resident who has formerly served as a teacher, principal, and chief turnaround officer for the state. Mr. Nesmith joins us today to kick off our third Education Equity Summit. Good morning, Mr. Nesmith.
Good morning. I'm Desi Nesmith, Deputy Commissioner of the Connecticut State Department of Education. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of the work being done around DEI ultimately is about ensuring our students and staff know they belong so they can realize their full potential. This is why the Connecticut State Board of Education titled its most recent 5-year strategic plan, Ensuring Equity and Excellence for All Connecticut Students. So why does this matter? Let's take a look at our educational landscape here in the state of Connecticut. In Connecticut, we have over 500,000 diverse students in our schools. Across 205 districts, we have over 1,500 schools and more than 110,000 school staff devoted to helping our students thrive. In Connecticut schools alone, more than 180 languages are spoken. This is why the work that you're doing matters. Regardless of an individual's life circumstances, we believe that students thrive when they are in diverse educational settings and have opportunities that acknowledge and value our differences and what brings us together. This is why the State Department of Education is committed to diversifying our educator workforce. There are a number of ways that we are doing this here at the department. Training and recruiting teachers of color who ultimately become future teachers is one of those ways, along with working with administrators and other figures who are currently in our students' lives. This includes the Educators Rising program, the Next Gen Educators program, which provides aspiring educators hands-on learning experiences in the classroom. The Male Educator Network Initiative focuses on males of color who have an interest in going into the profession of education. There is also the establishment of a Minority Teacher Recruitment Policy Oversight Council. We owe it to our children to make sure that they receive the education that prepares them to prosper in a global economy. I commend each one of you for being dedicated to the work that you're doing to ensure that all students in our state benefit, and including student voice in this work. Speaking of student voice, here in Connecticut, we have 2 student members who serve on the Connecticut State Board of Education. I want to introduce one of them to you now and ask him to speak with you about why this work, why your work matters. Rashad?
There's a difference between tolerance, acceptance, and community. We strive to tolerate people from all over the world and be accepting of their beliefs and values. But I believe to truly form community, whether it's a school community or the whole town, we need to know what others believe in and be interested in who they are. Using words like tolerance and acceptance shows a lack of interest in other people, and to build a vibrant community, we must care for and understand each other. Schools in Connecticut, for the most part, are decent with diversity, at least on paper, in terms of percentages of minorities in each school. We know, and we call it integration and diversity, but at school, it's clear that the numbers are only half the story. For the most part, minorities sit together at lunch and have separate friend groups, and lead relatively different high school experiences from the people around them. Indian students sit with Indian students, Hispanic students sit with Hispanic students, and for the most part, of course there are exceptions, for the most part, white students sit with white students. So even though our schools are diverse on paper, the main benefits of diversity are lost, and the school does not represent what the real world will look like when students graduate and get jobs. And I think the reason for this is a difference in culture and an understanding of each other. So, in Walton and our surrounding towns, I work to break down barriers by organizing cultural outreach events like Guru Vandana, where my friend's family and I host an event to honor our teachers in a traditional Indian way, or Raksha Bandhan, where we tie a bracelet on the hand of local firemen, policemen, and EMS personnel to represent our gratitude for their amazing work. The best way to advance our goals of equity, inclusion, and diversity is to learn more about the people around us and work to increase our understanding of their beliefs. For Guru Vandana, we reach out to our teachers from all around Fairfield County and invite them, along with their families and friends, to learn about Indian culture while honoring them for the exceptional work they do. For Raksha Bandhan, we contact and go to local police, fire, and EMS departments to thank them for their service and tie the traditional thread to their wrists and thank them and express our gratitude for their amazing service to our community. These programs serve to reach out to our community in a meaningful and memorable way, while also exposing our educators to and service people to Indian culture. This helps us promote a sense of unity because people understand each other and want to learn more about the people around them. On April 3rd, we're hosting an event called Darshana, A Glimpse into Hindu Civilization, which is an exhibition that provides glimpses into various facets of Hindu dharma, culture, and their contribution to society. This event is for people of all ages and people of all walks of life to engage in creating an open-minded environment of mutual respect and inspiration. Everybody from our schools and teachers to elected officials are coming to this event. In school, we also dressed in traditional Indian clothing for festivals like Diwali and Holi to proudly showcase our culture and festivals in the school community as well. These events, programs, and all the things we do every year have helped our community learn more about Indian culture and history, which in turn has helped bring people together. Today, almost everybody in the Walton community knows not only about festivals like Diwali, but also about our values as Hindus. And now people are interested in who we are and want to know more about our culture and values. This is community, and this is diversity, and this is how we make a difference in the fight for equity in our cities and schools. If everybody had their own outreach events to show people who they are and showcase their values and culture, then we would have a much more close-knit society with less conflict and real diversity, especially in school settings.
Thank you, Mr. Nesmith, for setting the tone this morning by describing the education landscape in Connecticut, explaining why the State Department of Education is committed to diversifying our educator workforce, and most importantly, why all this work matters. We also want to thank you for introducing us to Rashab and giving him the opportunity to share his voice with us. Rashab, the examples you shared from the work that you and others are doing in Walton to help break down barriers and create understandings of different cultures and beliefs demonstrates the power of inclusion, acceptance, and community, and the potential for making a difference in the fight for equity. Thank you, Rashab and Mr. Nesmith, for sharing your perspectives with us this morning. It's now my pleasure to introduce another one of our co-chairs from the Education Equity Committee and principal of Staples High School in Westport, Stafford Thomas, who will introduce our next speaker. Welcome, Stafford.
Thank you, Rosina. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I have the distinct honor of introducing our next presenter, Principal Joy Wright. She is a lifelong learner who has had the privilege of being in public education for over 20 years now. Joy has served as a classroom teacher, a consultant, an assistant principal, and a principal lead learner, also principal of the year in Connecticut. Joy earned her bachelor's degree right here in Trinity College in Hartford. She then went on to get her master's in secondary education from Brown University, and finally a master's degree in ed leadership from UConn. Joy enjoys collaborating with teachers and leaders to develop and promote innovative instructional and leadership practices that serve the needs of her students and promote staff members' community in meaningful ways. Her educational passions include building staff and student capacity to create experiences in a positive school culture and climate. Again, all working to build community. She's a huge fan of all things that support her youth, encourage them to shine. And Joy lives, works, reads, and most importantly, laughs in West Hartford. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next keynote speaker, Ms. Joy Wright.
Thank you, Stafford, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be a part of the third CAS-SCDE SERC Virtual Equity Summit Series, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion from multiple district and schools perspectives. When I think of EDI from the principal building leadership perspective, I can't help but think about how I came to this position. I'm not talking about being a part of this program per se, but to this place of being an educator and how that serves as another critical lens for my leadership. I hope you don't mind if I share something about me that wasn't on the bio that Stafford read. I'm from love and trauma and faith built on redemption. I'm from the inner city and broken home stereotypes turned into success stories because of a good God and loving, available grandparents. I'm from classrooms with blackboards and teachers working in inner city schools who held high expectations, but also had caring hearts from Cluster H at Lewis Fox Middle School to Buckley High School. I am from a tribe of mentors starting at an age when a teen needs a guiding hand when they're at the crossroads. Mentors who understood that education is the key that can't be used without preparation on the hidden rules of success. I'm from summers on college campuses. That was then my college home. I'm from professors who urged me to use my voice and encouraged me to take risks, even when something was unfamiliar. I'm from opportunity programs focused on changing the generational legacies around college attendance and poverty and putting teachers of color in our classrooms, from Upward Bound to the Institute for the Recruitment of Teachers and the Multicultural Alliance. My path is a result of people, spaces, and opportunities focused on providing BIPOC youth and adults with equitable access to spaces and opportunities that were not historically inclusive. As a school leader, my role is to continue the work to make sure that diverse members of school communities are provided access to opportunities and resources historically closed to or hidden, intentionally or unintentionally, from them to ensure the inclusive communities we all desire. Dr. Maya Angelou said that we should know that diversity makes for a rich tapestry, and we must understand that all threads of the tapestry are equal in value, no matter what their color. I work in a diverse district. I live in that same district. There are more than 77 languages represented in our schools. Approximately 24% of our students live in homes where English is not the home language. 18% of our town residents were born in another country. The ethnic diversity in our town is about 44%, and 17% of our students receive special education services, while 25% receive and are eligible for free and reduced meals. Needless to say, we are a multitude of threads creating a rich tapestry. However, what most excites me, warms my heart, fills my bucket, is the fact that our district values that rich diversity in our community and attempts to operate on the belief that diversity is our strength. I often tell students that one of my greatest responsibilities as a lead learner is the physical and psychological safety of our staff and students. At King Philip Middle School, our staff works to cultivate cultures of high achievement, dignity, and respect by nurturing relationships, implementing equitable practices and engaging practices, and growing in our emotional literacy. In support of growing our emotional literacy, we use the ruler framework, and one of the anchors is a school charter. And the start of ours reads, "We, the students and staff of King Philip Middle School, believe that all members of our school community should feel connected, safe, happy, accepted, and respected as we strive to support each other's success." Co-leading with my staff to support a school culture through an equity and diversity lens supports this commitment to create safe spaces to enact the equitable change needed. It requires us, to look in the mirror to identify how we as leaders are, can be, need to be the catalyst for the equitable change needed to make our vision and mission a sustainable reality. In a recent Educational Elements webinar for DEI, Tips for Leaders, the recommendation was that we need to, as leaders, learn something new to broaden our perspective and consciousness, unlearn our beliefs, assumptions, habits, perceptions of what's good and right, and relearn through discourse and its reexamination. Leaders have to be continuous learners. That's what I love about working in education. We get to be a student forever. We have to be willing to enter into a cycle of learning, unlearning, and relearning to continue the challenging but rewarding work of equity and inclusion. Examining our own paths or backgrounds, teachings to determine what helps or hinders us from being the catalyst our students, staff, and families need is critical. As we learn to broaden our perspective and consciousness, we've worked to look at our curriculum and teaching practice to make sure that texts, experiences, and learning activities reflect different cultures, perspectives, and experiences so students can see themselves or others. We continue to need professional development to re-examine our assumptions and practices to make sure that we are teaching and responding in culturally responsive ways to our students and our families. Our challenge is creating professional learning experiences that promote the level of reflection and conversation necessary to go the distance. 7 years ago, when we focused on a strategic approach to implementing social emotional learning at our school, it required us to broaden our perspective and our consciousness about what it really was and how it could shift our school community into one that was truly whole child centered. In order to keep our DEI lens fixed and clear, we are continually learning how to invite students and families into the conversation to bridge the divides. Throughout my leadership career, I've had to unlearn quite a few beliefs, assumptions, and habits about what good and right looks like to remove the barriers to equity and inclusion. This includes not leaning in to the change needed. So during my first few years, we spent time unlearning old models around parent involvement toward actively seeking to engage families around learning, accessing their funds of knowledge about their children, and seeking partnerships for student success. With respect to diversity and inclusion over the years as well, there have been a number of efforts to have courageous, crucial conversations about gender identity, race, diversity, and differentiated practice for all of our learners. For example, we continue to unlearn language that excludes our trans and non-binary youth. As we approach student behavior with the kids do well if they can mindset, it is a constant unlearning of beliefs and assumptions around why kids misbehave, a move from manipulation or willful, controllable choice to that of lagging skills to be taught in a collaborative problem-solving approach that includes the student. I'm sure I'm not alone in relearning that is taking place through discourse and about truly equitable practices and what it looks like to re-examine our systems that oppress instead of liberate our students toward pathways of success. This is a continual process, worth the time to work through the misunderstanding, and sometimes the outright pushback to support an investment in mindset and practices that move us closer to the communities our staff, students, and families deserve. It requires us to demonstrate a little self-care and loving kindness for ourselves, because we will certainly make errors and mistakes, but also with our staff and students as we're on this learning journey together. We can be clear but kind. We can be firm in our values and assumptions, our values and our practices to move towards an equitable community, but at the same time, continue to move collaboratively along that continuum. I shared a little bit with you about where I'm from, but where I want to be is part of a revolutionary collective of educational allies who are working together to create communities where the lens of equity and inclusion is always in use as we look at our operations, our responses, our engagement with all of our stakeholders. Educating students to become global citizens means equipping them with the tools to respectfully and effectively interact with people who look, sound, think, behave, and believe differently than they do. Working together as school staff, students, families, and those allies engaged in the work in the state, we can and will operationalize the strength of our diversity in ways that not only make all members of our community feel welcomed, accepted, appreciated, but also actively engaged in our school and greater community. Thank you, and I'm excited to hear from the other allies in our state moving us closer to that future.
Thank you, Joy, for being here with us today. Every time I listen to you speak, you truly amaze me with your passion and joy for education and how much you love and enjoy the work that you do. I really, really loved hearing you talk about the multitude of threads representing a rich tapestry. I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it, and how diversity is our strength. So your words, as always, are truly inspiring, and we can't thank you enough for joining us this morning and sharing your perspective with us. So thank you. Once again, my name is Rosie O'Brien Boytek, and I'm the host of our first panel conversation this morning with several Connecticut DEI directors and coordinators. One of the newest education positions being added to districts across Connecticut is that of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director or Coordinator. To the best of my knowledge, there are currently about 30 districts with someone specifically designated as an administrator with a DEI title and responsibilities. As you'll learn from our panel members this morning, the actual job title, job description, and responsibilities are still being defined. As you listen to our panelists, you'll hear just how critically important this work is for creating and sustaining a positive culture and high-quality learning environments that elevate diversity, equity, and inclusion and bring it to the forefront. One of the most important roles for those administrators is to engage all stakeholders in difficult and courageous conversations, to work relentlessly to ensure our educational systems continue to evolve, and to redefine educational equity for all. This is, as you will learn from our panelists this morning, some of the most critically important work beginning to take place across Connecticut. So I want to thank all our panel members and everyone who's joining us today for taking time to engage in this next conversation. It's now my pleasure to briefly introduce the members of our DEI panel to you. First off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gladys Labus, who is the Director of Equity and Language at the Connecticut State Department of Education. Welcome, Gladys.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Kevin Walton, who is the Director of Equity and Inclusion at the Area Cooperative Education Services, ACES.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to this great discussion with these powerful and capable thought leaders.
I love your background, by the way, Kevin.
Thank you.
It's great. Elsie Gonzalez is another one of our panel members this morning. She's the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Capital Region Education Council. Welcome at CREC. Welcome, Elsie.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Dr. Tanya Claiborne, I'm not sure if she's here yet, but is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion from Glastonbury Public Schools. So hopefully when she comes on, she can join us. Next, we have Dr. Lizette Torres, who is the Director of Equity and Instruction for Meridian Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Torres.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rosie. Looking forward to our discussions this morning.
Me too. Me too. We also have Dr. Gerald Hairstein, who is the Equity and Inclusion Specialist for Newington Public Schools.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing?
And we finally, seventh person on our panel this morning, not by any means the last and least, is Dr. Rosina Haskins, who is the Director of Equity for Advancement for West Hartford Public Schools. Welcome, Rosina.
Good morning, everyone. So great to share this space with all of you.
And I have to say, this is a very powerful and fun group of people to talk to. I always learn so much from you every time we get together. So I'm ready to get the questions started and have you introduce yourselves by talking about the fact that together as a panel, you bring a dynamic background of experiences to the DEI work in Connecticut. Some of you are fairly new in your current positions and others have had their roles evolve over time. I'm going to ask each of you to share with us how long you've been leading DEI work within your current role. So let's begin this conversation with Dr. Gladys Labus, Director of Equity and Language, again at the Connecticut State Department of Education.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you again. I just want to begin the conversation with defining the lens that I look equity through. I've been at the state level for 2 years, but before that, I've been in education K-12 for 30 some odd years and at the high school. But I just want to begin the conversation with the lens that we are looking at equity. And I'm looking more at systemic equity, and I'm looking at the research done in 2001. And for me, systemic equity is defined as the transformed way in which systems and individually habitually operate to ensure that every learner in whatever learning environment that learner is found has the greatest opportunity to learn, enhanced by the resources support necessary to achieve competence, excellence, independence, responsibility, and self-sufficiency for school and for life. And that is the lens. Even as a principal, I just looked through it. And in order to do this at the state level, we also have a equity audit that we developed that is still in process, and Kim Traverso and I worked together on it. And I know the word audit sounds like evaluative, but it's really a component for districts to look at their systems. And it's almost to promote an insight and discussion of your systems and processes in the district. And that's what we're looking for. And that should be coming out soon.
Great, thank you, Gladys. Next, I'd like to have Kevin Walton tell us a little bit about his work at ACES as the Director of Equity and Inclusion.
Sure. Good morning again. So I've been in this position since September 1st. However, my lens was developed way before that as an HR specialist. And I learned from my mentor and former director, Claudette Beeman, that it was all about fairness, and equity is about fairness. And we're going to hear a lot today about systems and dismantling systems and anti-racism and, you know, the struggles that we have in this position, especially because not everyone thinks that these type of positions are necessary. However, I'm going to always go back to that. We want to be able to treat people fairly and respectfully. And when we delve into the systems work, that will always be the basis for me. So my lens was developed through human resources, where it's all about fairness and treating people with respect.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Next, I'd like to have Elsie Gonzalez, who is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at CREC. Tell us about what you've been up to.
Good morning, folks. Elsie here. My pronouns are she, her, or ella. I have been at CREC since 2020. So officially 2 years and 1 month, according to LinkedIn, here at this agency. It's been great. I was hired, excuse me, to be responsible for providing strategic leadership to the development and implementation of DEI initiatives and the work across the agency as a whole. Prior to CREC, I was at the University of Connecticut, also doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and is an area of passion for me. And I've been very excited to bring ideas and initiatives here to the agency. You know, CREC has been doing equity work for a really long time, social justice work, so it's not new to the agency. What is new really is the role reporting to our executive director, and really the goal to align all of our efforts internally and externally, because we also provide services across the region with this work. So it's really an honor to be in this role here.
Great, thank you, Elsie. And I did see where Tanya came on, so I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Tanya M. Claiborne, who is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Glastonbury, and have her introduce herself to you and also tell you a little bit about her role in Glastonbury.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited. Well, let me use the word excited. I'm energized, right? That we're having this conversation and having this panel work here. I have been in Glastonbury with Glastonbury Public School for July 1st, right? Prior to that, I was consulting with Glastonbury about this work. But I want to say what's important is this work has always been part of my work, right? I would like to tell you that it started with some leadership role that I was hired for, but the truth is I initiated and advocated for that work as a student when I was in a school of choice student. We call it METCO in Massachusetts. So it's similar to the open choice program. I realized there were some areas that needed some support, because for me, this work is about advocating and about humanity. So that's the lens in which I look at it, what's right for people. And that is what I was hired to do here in Glastonbury, particularly at the central office level. And I have the opportunity to work with all teams, to work across the district, to infuse this lens. And it's very important. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you're here, Dr. Claiborne. Next, I'd like to introduce again Dr. Lizette Torres from Meridian, who is the Director of Equity and Instruction.
Thank you, Rosie. Well, I've been with the Meridian Public Schools for over 20 years as a teacher, assistant principal. This is my first year in the role as Director of Equity and Instruction. And even though this is a new position for Meridian, the work around equity and equitable practices has been ongoing in our district for several years, but it's nice to now have the work centralized under one umbrella. I come from a lens with this work as a former student in Meridian, as a Board of Ed employee, and as a resident of the town of Meridian. So my lens covers a wide, vast, range of what's happening in Meridian. So thank you for having me today.
Great, thank you, Lizette. And next we have from Newington, the Equity and Inclusion Specialist, Dr. Gerald Hairstein.
Wow, so I've been in Newington since August. And before that I was at CREC, and much like Dr. Claiborne, I think that the work has been a part of me for so long, it's hard to really figure out when it started. But I think what shapes my approach to the work now is that I've done it so many places in Connecticut. I was just looking through the list of attendees and I was like, yep, work there, work there, work there, work there. So I think having done it in so many places and also across so many things, from SRBI to the Vanguard Initiative to data teams to PBIS. And I think at this point, I'm able to hopefully support Newington with the benefit of that experience, but also I think make sure that I'm staying open as a learner to what Newington has to bring and offer to the equity work in and of itself, and hopefully I can contribute to that.
Great, thank you. And from West Hartford, the Director of Equity Advancement, Dr. Rosina Haskins.
Hi, good morning again. So this is my 7th year in this role, but only 3 years in which it has been my dedicated role professionally, but has been in my DNA for my entire life. Like Gerald, I don't really know when, but I'm in it. And I think it'll be my lifetime role wherever I am. But this role has evolved over the years and has deepened from really building our cultural competence to not wearing an equity lens, but wearing a LASIK equity lens to build partnerships. And this role and this work in my Office of Equity Advancement, we touch on all areas of programs, policies, and practices across all district operations. And so as you heard from my esteemed colleague principal, right, building capacity so that this work isn't siloed has been one of the ways in which this role has evolved and has allowed me to be kind of a broker for deep and sustainable change. And so I am very lucky to be informed and empowered by my colleagues here in the district and those across the state and those on this panel today.
And I will say that this is a very close group of people working on DEI issues. And at the end, I will also invite people, if you know of any other coordinators or directors in districts, to let us know so that you can become part of this wonderful group of people that I always learn from, and am really excited to get into the other questions right now. So thank you for introducing yourself. And I'm going to open up this next set of questions to all of you and ask them to you. So feel free to jump in and let's get started. So as you know, we've seen an increased effort across the state and the nation to prioritize the advancement of diversity, equity, and inclusion within educational organizations. I know that most of you have just begun in your position, although I also heard that you've been living it throughout your lives. So I know you're going to have a lot to say on this question. But even though you've just started, what positive changes have taken place or what has been your greatest success so far? And Elsie, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thank you, Rosie. So I would say that when I first started here at the agency, it was really at the height of the national unrest, right, after the death of George Floyd. And there was great urgency for all of us, whether in education, higher education, corporate, nonprofit organizations, to really center race at the core of our conversations. And I think it really highlighted for a lot of folks, right, the difference of diversity, equity, and inclusion work and the work of anti-racism and what does that mean for people. So at CREC, we had an opportunity to have, for the first time, really a honest conversation about race, hear people's perspectives and thoughts and feelings about what that looks like. And as a result, we started to create a program for our employees to be able to have that space. And in collaboration with other folks in our equity steering committee, we dedicated a lot of time, right, to creating a program that says, really, we want to center race here. We want to think about what does it look like for ourselves? What does it look like in our local department? And how do we create an action plan that impacts the work that we're doing while doing that? And it's been a work in progress because, as many of you know, professional development time is very limited, right? So we're trying to be really strategic and very creative. And how do we create those spaces and those conversations? So we have a program that folks can sort of tap into, but we also have really allowed for flexibility because there are folks that are in different places, right? There are folks that have been doing this work, having this conversation for a really long time. So, the 101, what does race mean? What is racism? Not necessarily works for everybody. So we have learned a lot to be flexible, to work with really the knowledge that we have at the table and work through sort of like the awareness and the enhancement of knowledge, skills, and abilities that folks need to grow on and be able to provide those resources. So really proud of that. We're growing that space and learning more about what that means. We also really, from the leadership side, have been really talking about how do we role model what that looks like, right, for our agency, for our employees, because it's one thing to say, that we're a social justice agency, that we mean, that this is what we do, but how does that feel? What does it look like? What are some action steps towards those promises, really, and commitments that we have on our websites and that we have when we recruit folks and when we ask them to come to our agency. So we're really committed to role modeling that. And it's a work in progress, but this is a lifelong journey, and we're really excited about that. Another thing that I would say that I am very excited about and that we're proud of is really the establishment of our Directors of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Network. We reached out to folks, really, I would say in the beginning of my, I would say it was January of last year, I saw, right, that more folks were being hired into these positions. And selfishly, I was looking for support, additional resources. And honestly, I would say I was starting to get worried, right, about misalignment or siloing the work in the 69 districts that we have in our state. And I really wanted to create a space where we were able to discuss what these roles look like for you, what are some of the successes and challenges. And when we first started to meet as a network, it was like 9 of us, and we currently meet, and it's like 23 of us that meet on a monthly basis, in these roles, talking about best practices, the challenges that we're coming up, with in the challenges that we have in the role, the struggle of, really the systemic barriers that are holding us back from transforming equitable spaces. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to continue aligning DEI work across our districts and, leveraging the expertise of folks that come with lots of experience in this work, and really providing an educational opportunity that we've all dreamed about.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to ask you, Lizette, what has happened in your district? What positive changes have you seen, and what are some of your successes so far?
So I started in this role in mid-July, and it's been a great experience and very busy so far. There have been a few successes that I'd like to share. Our work in Meridian started years ago, and we had 12 teachers trained to become equity leaders within their buildings. The majority of this work focused at our high school level. So this year, we now have 24 teachers, at least 2 from each middle and elementary school, who are being trained to become equity leaders within their buildings and then turnkey this important work. The goal is to have them train their prospective staff starting in January 2023, and then create equity teams within each of their buildings. But knowing that their teachers would be receiving this training, it was important for us to provide that professional learning for our elementary administrators, so they're aware of the work that their teachers would be getting, so that then they can turn and support them within their buildings. We also have our affinity group that for our staff of color that continues to meet regularly and provides a safe space for all staff, from administrators, teachers, climate specialists, paraprofessionals, tutors, clerical staff, custodial staff. Any staff of color is welcome to attend, and we meet regularly, we share our stories, and we offer support and learning from one another. This year, we had over 30% of our new hires this year were teachers of color, so we're very proud of our recruitment efforts. And our new teachers were invited, all of our new teachers were invited for an ongoing professional learning around teaching for equity, which is facilitated by our grade 5 teacher, Simone James, so that our teachers are also getting that experience as well, so they can turnkey that within their classrooms. It's important for us to hear from our students as well. So to do that, we've interviewed several students throughout the year, asking them what their experience has been like as students of color within our schools. And hearing from them directly has been wonderful. And you can see our student videos are posted on our website, but we have 2 posted as of right now. The other thing we've done in the last 12 months is update our website and share our work with the Board of Education and with meetings that we have regularly. But we wanted to make sure that our community at large was aware of the work happening within the public schools. So what we did is we held a forum last month where we shared all of our work, from hiring practices, work with our bilingual and EL students, work around our equity work with teachers, with students, with staff. So we shared that with the community at large so that they were aware of what the work happening within the school system. So in less than a year, we've had a lot going on. And we are just looking forward to continuing to push this work forward within the Meridian Public Schools.
Wow. Yeah, you have had a lot going on, and I'm sure if we listened to everyone talking, they would say the same thing. And I think that's a success in and of itself, just everything that all of you are doing. But as you know, and may have experienced, DEI can be faced with resistance. In fact, that's probably an understatement. So from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges or barriers when you're doing this work, and why is DEI work so critically important? Rosina, let's start with you.
Let me first say that I have been looking forward to this platform for weeks, because this panel represents some of our most empathetic DEI advocates, and this work requires like heart and fortitude in times of predictable storms, and when lightning strikes on sunny days, as it often does. So I love talking about progress and successes like Elsie and Lizette described in their settings, but I also think it can be therapeutic for DEI leaders to have safe spaces to be able to openly name forms of resistance and challenge that confront us. So Rosie, I'm glad that you asked this question, because from my experience, some of our biggest challenges or barriers show up in three common forms of implicit and explicit resistance at very concerning levels. I would say explicit resistance to transformative change is one of our biggest challenges. There seems to be a strong hold to maintain this inequitable and harmful status quo in a way that like I can't wrap my head around. I'll never fully understand, and I don't even want to attempt to rationalize it, but we see it across the nation. These coordinated efforts to create a narrative of DEI work as being like this, I guess, subversive plan to indoctrinate young people to reject America and its history. DEI detours is another challenging form of more implicit resistance. So when you hear things like, we're going to slow it down, meet people where they are, move at their pace and comfort level. And I get it, like I believe in we're all on this journey and having grace with people, but having grace with people who are really leaning in, you know, as Joy Wright talked about. Dina Simmons, she's an activist and educator, and Paul Gorski, I love their work. He's an equity literacy consultant. They talk about how resistors in schools committed to equity, they should feel like uncomfortable. They should feel isolated being on the outskirts of DEI work, but instead they're made to feel like protected and insulated when equity skittish leaders take detours or like move at glacial speeds to advance DEI efforts. So, you know, what often happens to DEI leaders, we are made to feel or be portrayed as overtly political, hostile, militant. And yes, I too have been characterized as the angry Black woman. And only my husband has seen that, right? But deficit thinking is a more implicit but dangerous form of resistance. And that's when institutions, I guess, problematize children and they try to fix them rather than taking a candid look at their own leaky pipelines and just overhauling their faulty systems that lose, oppress, and hurt children. And so I just want to share, like, one way that we counter these detractors is to remain steadfast. And instead of being defensive, we double down and we make it explicitly clear what we are doing instead of like expending energy combating these manufactured fears and confusion tactics. So I'll close with, and I'll share my airtime with my colleagues by saying that what is critical as part of your question in this work is for our educators to be able to identify and address how disparities in educational experiences impact opportunities and outcomes. We really can't leave all of that to hope and chance. We must be intentional. As Elsie said, we have to be relentless too in this pursuit to be more equitable, inclusive, and socially just.
And it's great to hear your dedication and being relentless. It's tough, but as I was watching you, it was also interesting as you're describing different resistance and different people that you come across, that you're still able to do it with a smile on your face, because sometimes that's really, really tough. So kudos to you. And I would like to also hear from Tanya. Like, tell us about your feelings on resistance and barriers and how we can get past that.
All right, so thank you so much, Rosina. Like, you dropped so many gems in that moment. I have a few words to add because I do not want to repeat, but I have a few words to add. I say the word bias, right? And when I mean bias, I'm not just talking about the people who are resisting, I'm talking about my own bias. That has been a challenge, right? I come into this work passionate, and I always have to remember that I can't assume someone's experience, even though we may have some identity markers that are the same or that are close, right? I have to remember that. However, the hardest thing, I think the most challenging part of this work, and I'm just going to say it, is respectability politics and demagoguery. That's what I think is the hardest part. And I will explain what I mean by that. When I think about respectability politics, I'm talking about, right, there's this need for this change, but the attitudes or the institutional way that we have centered around one demographic of people creates that space where even when we're making change, we're trying to make sure it fits within that box as to be respected by the norm or as to seen acceptable by the norm. That has made this work very challenging, right? Because we're talking about cultural shifts. We're talking about valuing difference, but yet you want to value the difference according to the norm. No, that won't work. The other part that I think is when I say demagoguery is like we're listening to falsehoods and accepting that as fact and trying to politicize something that's not political, right? We're making this work political. And when we're talking about humanity, that shouldn't include politics, in my humble opinion. So when we're doing the work, we need to put some things aside. And I know that it has been a challenge for people to look at it that way, right? I keep hearing about this bipartisan. I keep hearing about the different parties. I don't understand for the life of me what that has to do with doing what's right for children. I don't understand for the life of me why that's even come up when we're talking about providing access and opportunity for all kids. That is our job. That is not just the job of the DEI office. That is the job of every educator, every leader, every person in education. So when I think about what is the most challenging, is that mind shift that people are going to have to make. And if they don't want to make it, that the ones that know, we continue moving, right? We will put anybody on the bus that wants to come along. Anybody, but the bus cannot stop because we can't get past some people for whatever reason, whether it be fear, whether it be not knowledgeable enough to feel they can make a decision. We can't stop the bus from moving. So perseverance has to happen through all of this. And I say that because the work is so important. When we talk about providing places of opportunity and access, that's great, right? But what's more important is it sends a message that every child in person is valued. And when you're valued, you feel valuable, right? And that is a true catalyst for success and greatness. So.
Thank you, Tanya. You packed you talk about packing a lot into a small little chunk, but you led right into our next question when you said we can't stop the bus from moving. And we know that this work is not just something that happens at a local level, but has to come from systemic change. But we also know that equity and diversity and inclusion are not just those local problems, but they have to be addressed collaboratively on many different levels to resolve issues and that lead to positive and lasting change. So what are some of the systemic issues that you've encountered what needs to be done to address them, and how are we engaging diverse stakeholders in that work, especially after just hearing what Dr. Claiborne described as all the different people coming together. So systemic issues. Kevin, we haven't heard from you, so why don't we start with you on that one?
Great, thank you. And I've just been enjoying this masterclass, so you wonder why we look forward to meeting with these thought leaders on every first Friday. So I'm just always in awe of kind of their perspective. So I would say this, the systemic issues that I've encountered are the same issues that have plagued education and, quite frankly, this country since its inception. This work is not new. In fact, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, Cesar Chavez, Lillie Ledbetter, and countless indigenous labor leaders all spoke out and fought for fairness and real opportunities in the workplace. In fact, Dr. King was assassinated the day after leading the labor march in Memphis. So this work has been literally life and death, right? Racist laws and policies have been around for centuries, as have human rights movements, such as the Harlem Renaissance and the Southern Freedom Movement, otherwise known as the Civil Rights Movement. The issues have been there and have remained the same, right? DEI is just the latest iteration for this fight to democratize systems. And when I say democratize, we talk about diversity, and Ruby Sales talks about, when we talk about diversity, we have to move beyond, because diversity indicates that someone owns the table and they're expanding the table for us and providing a seat at the table for us, where democratizing the word says that it's accessible for everyone. Right. And so there's also has to be this look at the language that we speak, because this language has been co-opted, as one of my colleagues said earlier. And the fact of the matter is, some of us have been fighting this fight for freedom and liberation and social justice since 1619 and even beyond. But one of the biggest systemic issues that I've encountered is that not everyone is ready for this reckoning. Right. When you have people that openly say that we do not have a race problem, it is usually indicative of having a race problem. And just because you haven't openly called someone the N-word or some other derogatory term does not mean you're actively, and especially when you're actively working to maintain the hierarchy of the status quo, right? This type of thinking signals an unwillingness to see or acknowledge systemic or structured racism as being problematic, as well as an indicator of not having an open mind. So I also think that we're in an industry that has to figure out what to do with us as DEI directors. And I would suggest using us as change agents. As I spoke, in my experience as a human resources specialist, I was able to build work equity with our staff and our colleagues, making connections, and which it made it easiest to have those difficult conversations. But it was also about making connections with people, making people feel valued, making people feel respected. So I think all of the things here, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't even need DEI directors, right? We wouldn't even need it if we use the strategies and initiatives that can make this industry work. So the thing that I have to be, and all of us have to be mindful is that not everyone is open to change, right? Especially those that don't want to change the status quo. And so that's why the fight is for changing, dismantling, and disrupting systems, right? Because when we do that, we take away the power of those individuals who may harbor racist and discriminatory views. So this fight for me has always been about kind of being able to be at the top, ensuring that our district leaders are on board with this work, but it's really about dismantling systems, right? It's either simple, like Dr. Kente say, either you're a racist or you're an anti-racist, and I'm fully committed to this anti-racist work of dismantling systems and rebuilding. And I will yield to the next speaker.
I'm just going to say it's a lot of tough work to dismantle all those systems, and I think calling yourselves change agents is probably exactly what you need to be doing. Gerald, I always love listening to you, so I'd like to hear your opinion on this topic as well.
No pressure, especially right after this guy just starts talking, then drops the mic, and then sees the floor. So thank you, Senator. This guy, I'll turn the floor over. He's something else. No, in the strain that's what's already been said. It is, it's a good thing to be a part of a group like this, and a welcome distraction, to sometimes the way life kind of unfolds. My son is sick, and so if you know me, you know that me and my son are attached at the hip, so it's hard for me to kind of be fully present. But he's okay. You know, I just don't like when he's sick at all. But with that, I'll say, I think one of the things that is a systemic issue is just devaluing the expertise of racial awareness. And so as a consequence of that, what I think happens is that you misalign people with the work, and folks who don't necessarily understand fully what race consciousness does to the system of education are being allowed to impact policies, practices, and changes within it. And really, that's the work of someone who studied how those things kind of interact. How does race shape pedagogy? How does racism shape policy? How does the culture of race actually inform the way teachers hold conceptions of kids in their brain, and students hold conceptions of teachers in their brain? So that's an actual field of study that many of us have kind of dedicated not just dollars and time to, but our lives to. So I think taking that out of the picture when we go to act on change is a problem, because I think sometimes you can have the right tool and the wrong person doing the work. And I think what we could do better is to utilize the skills and the people that we have to inform the work that we want to do. And that's going to require, I think, brass tacks, hiring, shifts, which moves beyond, I think, the moral impetus to be a more diverse body of educators. But I think it's the actual practical impact of when you have people for whom their experience can't be replaced by training, that they add some value to the system that can't be added without them. So that's the why of, I think we need to diversify staff across the board, not just in classrooms, because I think it's a tangible value add, and I think it's a tangible miss when we don't have it. The other thing that I think is a systemic issue has to do with training as well. And it's been mentioned a little bit, I believe, just that systemically, training does not necessarily serve as a proxy for change, that you can't train your way out of everything. Some things you absolutely just have to change it. It can't exist the way it was, and it can't exist the way it is. So you have to fundamentally do something different. Training draped over that is just spending good money after a bad practice. And so I think that is what kind of creates, I think, sometimes a resource issue, is that you can't explain what you did with what you had, because I think what we do sometimes doesn't necessarily make sense. So I believe that what can be done about that, again, is really slowing down the pace and creating a true vision that aligns to what we need to do in terms to be different. So vision statements moving beyond actual, kind of words on a page, and becoming things that we live and check in on routinely, having a plan that actually makes us accountable to the things that we say we want to be about, and having the voices of, again, people who have experience and knowledge relative to vision, that kind of vision change, be a part of the vision creation and the management of the vision and mission. I think lastly, I think there is a terminology issue that education, it isn't necessarily unique to equity, but I think it especially impacts equity. I think we have become, and I'm taking this concept justifiably so, I hope, from the book The Cast, Isabel Wilkerson, I think, did an artistic work with how she talked about race and society and race and class as intersectional parts of how we live together and pass each other spaces. One of the points that she makes in that text is that we have to evolve the way that we talk about things, or else that we can't necessarily see them or do things about them in a very different way. And one term that she talks about is the misuse and overuse of racism, that it's so vitriolic and personal sometimes that it's misused, and not to necessarily do away with it, but to make sure that we understand what it actually is impacting by use of the term caste. Same with education. I think sometimes DEI has become a proxy term for real issues around racism and race. And I think culture doesn't serve as a proxy for race. I think identity doesn't serve as a proxy for race is race, and race is not racism. And I think clarifying terminology helps us to figure out what problem it is that we want to fix and what resources are best used for the issues. So one way to, I think, help to resolve that is to make sure that we're pulling information all the time to help individuals and groups of people and whole cohorts of folks understand what terminology is in accordance with what our issues are. And then that helps, I think, bring whole cohorts of people, groups of people and individuals along in the process of change in a more meaningful way.
I would say you're absolutely right with that whole idea of vision of where is it that we're going to go and what do we need to do. And we also really in our state, whenever we're talking, need to come up with what are those shared definitions and improve our vocabulary so we can all speak the same speak. So thank you for that, Gerald. Next question I'd like to know is, as this work evolves and deepens, which is exactly what you were getting at, Gerald, is that we may find ourselves frequently adjusting your practice and approach to this work with good intentions through the lens of diversity, inclusion, systemic racial equity, and social justice. But what about impact? How do you know if your intentional strategic actions are having a positive impact? How do you monitor progress, and what data and feedback do you collect and examine? And at the beginning, Gladys, I think you started to talk about an equity audit that you have been working on at the State Department. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and any other ideas that from a state perspective we might have?
Sure, thank you. And I also need to say what a wonderful conversation this is. And it just reminds me that, you know, when I was recruited from Puerto Rico to teach in bilingual programs in Connecticut, that we back in the 70s, and of course I started teaching when I was 5 years old, just so you know. It was so interesting how we were already working on, you know, on equity, and we just didn't call it that. Also in 1977, Connecticut, we wrote the first bilingual law in Connecticut, and that was written by Tomas Miranda and I, and that was also to provide equity for our English language learners, multilingual learners. And of course, it was rewritten in 2015. And when you talk about adjusting practice, and the reason I give you that little history is because in 1977, for us to pass the bilingual law, we had to adjust our practice. And put that students could only stay 30 months. Now we know back 60 years that students take more than 60 months to learn a language, but we had to adjust our practice to pass the law. But now in 2015, we changed that. So we adjusted that. And also these conversations are difficult, but I always, I'm not one that has anyone that knows me has a personality that I tend to, you know, pull back or anything. I tend to be very outgoing. And I always would say to people, if you're not invited to the table, bring your chair and just push yourself in and just bring your discussions. So that has been my philosophy throughout my career, my 45 years in education. And those you know, so those strategies have always helped. Also, when I stood up to help my community, I was also it wasn't well received, but it's not going to change my stance. I will continue to speak up. So right now at the state level, like you asked, Rosie, we did develop that equity audit. And again, that is something for more conversation. I don't want this to be another checklist. You know how we have, you know, okay, something else to do. No, we want this to really be a document, a living document for people to have discussions about their policies, their structure, their curriculum, and so on. Again, I also have another role at the state, which is to oversee the African American, Black, Puerto Rican, Latino curriculum. And because we know that identity matters in the curriculum. We know that. In order for students and teachers need to, and we know this, asset-based teaching is important, that students already come with many, many assets, and we need to use that. And identity is important. So having this curriculum is clearly one of those big components that I'm also pushing and addressing. And of course, you also heard about the comments made that we're teaching critical race theory. Well, no, this is not a critical race theory. Critical race theory is a theoretical framework, not a curriculum. This is a curriculum. And so, and I always take that stance and make sure that people are clear in what we mean. So the data based on this equity audit that we developed, we would hope to have it out. We hope to have conversations with district to share what their findings are, how we could assist, how can we help with this, because we really want this concept to move forward, and we need to move it quickly, and we cannot take a step back. No.
It sounds like a great tool and something that will be helpful to districts. So we'll look forward to seeing that coming out from CSDE in the near future. Gerald, I'd like to hear your ideas too about what are you guys doing over in Newington to monitor and make sure that what you're doing is going to make a difference.
Yeah, so we, maybe a little pretext would kind of help. I think from some of the work that I had done prior to coming to Newington, one of the things that has started to become more central to the professional development design that I would have in place most times would be an equity audit. And, you know, without going into probably what aren't helpful details now, the tool was meant to be a way to help locate where equity issues were across a district or a school more specifically. And the reason for that is because the professional development would always be something, it'd be like hanging a picture on a wall without a hook. It would just slide down. And what an equity audit does is it tells you where's the most secure place to hang your work. Where is another secure place to hang the work? So it gives you placement and strategy. And so taking that kind of concept into data analysis and progress monitoring for equity work has established the way that we're going to become a more capable district in terms of monitoring the growth that we have for equity. So I say that to suggest, one, that the scale of the thing that you measure is super important. You don't have to measure everything that you do all at once because you don't have a hook that big. It can seem attractive, but really you can't. The question I think becomes, well, what would you do with it? That's a lot of information. Where would it go? And I think that can actually work against you because then it creates an urgency for action that isn't real. Or it can at least create an urgency that becomes the action, and urgency isn't real, the issue is the issue. So what we are trying to do is establish, one, the places first where any information can be dealt with. So our best work is to establish infrastructure for data first. And so that's teams at multiple levels who have expertise and analytic expertise within the team in different ways, so that when they're given information, they can analyze it, understand what it's actually saying and where it needs to go, a hook on a wall. I think what becomes of the actual tools that we use are sort of being developed over time. And maybe a way to sort of exemplify that is we are doing things that we collect data with as we do it. So we have a book club process for the entire district. But the book club isn't the actual, and having a book club isn't the end game. It's using that structure to develop capacity across levels of awareness for a small cohort of people and measuring that incrementally so that the next time that we do it, we know how people learn, by whom, and with what materials over what period of time. That's scalable, but that gets to our awareness racially and cultural by having a consistent language. So I think going back to the vision statement that I made, the second part, once you have the apparatus in place to actually handle data, is to know what you're going to do with it. That's why visions are essential, because they tell you the ways in which change is going to actually articulate over time. So we've established a vision for equity in our equity work that actually details what we want the language development and capacity development for language use to actually look like. Ways that we do that can be measurable toward our vision. We have two other parallel structures that we're going to try to establish sort of growth and movement in, but they also work in accordance to their own sort of sub-vision for equity in that area. And lastly, I would then say to go back and be willing to revise it again. So right now we're planning for what the summer can look like for cohorts of people who are working across those three subvisions for equity to revisit what happened. And I think self-reflection is an essential part of any analytic tool that you have to understand. I think to Dr. Claiborne's point, that the tool is one excellent thing that you need, but you need to have the greatest tool of measurement, I think, is the person who's actually doing the measurement. And so we have to have folks who are increasingly aware of what the equity issues are, and they use the tool as a tool to help inform what they're capable of doing, because they're going to actually be part of the paintings that we hang up. They're going to be the demonstrations of equity that we have. And as we get more colleagues who are capable of analyzing their own work, analyzing equity relative to their role, we have an incredible tapestry of portraits that we can hang up that will show our district vision. And that's the vision that you see, is the actual people doing the actual work incrementally over time. So those are our steps to, I think, monitoring our progress and having notable progress in specific areas for what we call equity.
I love your metaphor of the hook on the wall and the tapestry of portraits across. And I can't wait to see that in a couple of years. I'd love to come to your district and just look at that tapestry because it's so important. And that whole talk about vision leads us into the next question, because it's great to have a vision, but in order to accomplish that vision and to move towards that vision, you also have to have some short and long-term goals. So I'm wondering what different districts are doing. So Kevin, tell us about your long and short-term goals.
Get off mute here. So as stated, this work is and we're still figuring out the work. So I've taken these last 6 months to kind of figure out what the work needs to be done. And for me, it ends up being connecting the dots, right? Because the work is already there, the groundwork, the framework is there. So it's really about how we connect the dots. So in order for our ACEs to even have a chance to effectively implement, develop and implement a DEI strategy, we have determined that it is a priority for our organization and it's being embraced by our leaders. And I think that needed to be the first step, because we can't continue to give reverence to racist individuals. I talked about before, people who don't want to ignite, and I keep saying using the word racist, but also complicit folks, right? People who just want to maintain the status quo. So it is important or it isn't important either way, right? But for folks our leaders must embrace this work and continue to have it trickle down. Embracing DEI strategies makes good sense, but it's also paramount for creating a better world, right? And so we've begun the process of developing ACE's DEI strategic plan with an emphasis on creating a culture of fairness, inclusion, opportunity, and belonging, right? And so this is going to take real, continuous, committed leadership. So in order to develop a DEI strategic plan, we will continue to create opportunities to engage our stakeholders. Our first stakeholder, our most important being our, and from a customer service model being our employees, right? But all of our stakeholders, but about creating a safe and inclusive workplace and learning environment. And this will include listening sessions, focus groups, town hall meetings, engagement surveys, DEI audits, professional learning opportunities, skill building, and professional learning around courageous conversation, impactful conversation, recruitment and retention, building pipelines, and developing cultural competence. But some of our long-term goals, including cultivating the creation, right? And so the creation of the Walton Equity Cipher, which will show the need for this work to be well-defined, fluid, and continuous, hence the cipher. And so there are 5 buckets that we want to look at, right? So it's inward facing, right? So that means it's in terms of recruitment and retention, professional development, policy and procedure audits, developing pipelines, career advancement, employee engagement, curriculum audits, right? Outward facing meaning democratizing the educated workforce, statewide professional development that ACES has been engaged in, and continuing to develop local, regional, statewide, and national partnerships. Skill building, and not to be confused with professional development, right? Because I've heard far too often people aren't, people, especially our education leaders, continuously say that. A lot of them say, we don't want to talk about when things pop up, like we talk about incessantly about the use of the N-word or racist language in schools and things like that. And people continuously say, well, I don't want to talk about it because I don't know how to talk about race. And so instead of continuing to get upset about it and question it, what we're going to do is we're going to do some skill building, right? So the skill building work is to provide implicit bias training and courageous, impactful conversation and developing cultural competence, meaning we're going to teach people to be able to talk about it, right? Because I prefer that people talk about it and maybe get it wrong or say something that might get pushed back on versus not saying anything, because silence is complicit, right? And so we need people to develop that skill to be able to talk about, and not just racism, but all of the isms, right, that impact us in this world, but also show itself every day in our districts. And then, as I spoke about earlier, right, democratizing the work, making all opportunities accessible to everyone. Opportunity, again, career advancement, inclusion. And then last is culture, right? What we want to do is we want to be rowing in the same direction. Right? That's the ultimate goal, get people rolling in the same direction, right? When we talk about culture, we talk about our people safe, right? Safe to speak their minds, safe to introduce new ideas, safe to just kind of be themselves, making connections, belonging, constant communication, making sure people are employees and stakeholders are feeling valued and respected. And also, like I stated, for me, and I'm always going to go back to kind of just making sure that we're treating people fairly and whatever that looks like in individual or organizational situations.
Great, thank you. And that's almost like a whole course that you just gave us in a couple of minutes, but really great stuff. Elsie, I'm going to ask you to answer the same question. What are you up to at CREC?
Awesome. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin, for sharing. And we'll have to connect on all of that because that sounds amazing at ACES. So here at CREC, I've worked in collaboration with our executive leadership and our equity steering committee to establish 3 focus areas for our DEI work. And those are, the first one is cultural awareness and anti-racist practices. The second is equitable pathways. And the third is a healthy and inclusive culture and climate. So each of those areas, we have determined goals for those areas. We want to be able to enhance the competencies of all employees through, trainings, opportunities for conversations on race. We're currently working on a glossary of terms to really have a clear understanding of language, right? Dr. Hairstein talked about that, it's really critical that folks understand, how we're defining these terms so that they have really a lot of clarity about how to enter the work and how to really contribute and add value to the goals and alignment that we want to create. We have also established an equity library. So it's a virtual library where anybody across the agency can really can download books on diversity, equity, and inclusion so that they have enhanced their own learning. We also are working on a required mandated training for all employees that they'll have to take upon being hired here at the agency to really give everybody clarity of our goals of where we are as an agency, what we're trying to do, and really what the expectations are as an employee here at the agency, right? It's that you really are aligned to the passion, that you are here to contribute to that and be and create goals for yourself in that work. And so this, sort of awareness piece is ongoing, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, there are folks that are at different levels. So while we want to be able to create a foundation, right, of resources that everyone can tap into, but each sort of director and division also create action plans for their staff and their own strategic planning. For equitable pathways, our goals are really to attract, retain, and develop Black, Indigenous, and people of color at all levels. Some of my colleagues have mentioned, the critical need for representation across different roles. And that's true everywhere, in particular in leadership positions. And, because we know where our folks of color are, and we are not doing well. So we know that, and we're going to work through what we need to systemically to be able to impact that. Some of the ways is we're actually partnering with a consultant to establish a required inclusive recruitment and hiring training module for anybody that touches search, right? So any search committees, folks that look at resumes, folks that are doing interviews. We have an interview list and bank of, inclusive questions that really help us to determine where a candidate is at in their understanding of our vision and our mission and what we're really trying to create in diverse and equitable spaces. So we're hoping to have that ongoing opportunity for folks to understand what does it mean to recruit with an equity lens. And we're really excited about the opportunity to have that ongoing conversation. We also work collaboratively with folks that are, doing residency programs, here for our teaching and educator role. So that's really exciting. Talking about those pipelines that Kevin mentioned, it's really critical that we focus on that. And we also have been establishing ongoing kind of like promotional inclusive recruitment events. So we invite folks to learn more about our agency, learn more about our schools, learn more about what it means to be an employee here, and what we have to offer folks that want to come work here. And then for a healthy and inclusive culture, we want to establish a culture that's open, affirming, and inclusive. And one of the ways that we've really done that is by establishing employee network groups. So in this last year, we launched 3 new, actually we have 4 now, but in the first year we had 3. We had the Black Employee Network Group, Juntos Avanzamos, which is our Latinx employee network group, and we have CREC Pride, LGBTQIA and Allies group. And just this past year, we launched the CREC US Military Community, and these groups really serve to help establish ongoing community, a sense of belonging, and really to an opportunity for leadership to hear the voices of our employees here and work to thread really the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion through their experience in whatever roles they have here at the agency. It's really exciting, and they're all growing. The most exciting part for me is that each of the groups has an executive sponsor. So a member of our leadership team sits with them on a regular basis to plan really their events, their programs, to discuss topics, and really to ensure, right, that that there is a two-way street, right? A bridge to our leadership team. Because a lot of times, when you're working in an agency, your distance from a leadership team member is very far. So this provides an opportunity for any member of the organization to sit really closely with a member of our leadership team, share their concerns, share their excitement, share their visions for what they want to see more of, or what they want to see change in our organization. So those are really great opportunities. So those are kind of big and ongoing. In short term, I am most excited about our collaboration with the Akuma Educational Initiative. We are working really closely to enhance our relationships with our Native and Indigenous communities here in Connecticut. We're working on establishing a land acknowledgement for our agency, and we have hosted 1 of 2 development sessions of learning more about what does it mean to acknowledge and create space for Indigenous communities in our conversations. So we're really excited about that growth, and we're hoping to launch a land acknowledgement for our agency that folks can use, internal and external if they wanted to, in the next year. So we're excited about those opportunities.
Okay, great. And it sounds like a lot of professional development going on at CREC, and that's very, very exciting to hear all of that. We've got just a little bit of time, but I know that one of the things that our people, or that anyone watching, is going to want to know are about other valuable resources that you have found. And so I'm going to ask 2 people just to tell us quickly some of your favorite resources. So starting with Tanya, what are a couple of your favorite resources for professional development?
So I am digging into some serious books right now. I'm just going to hold them up because they have been game changers for me in the way that I'm going to approach this work. Like right now, we're planning for next year, right? We're planning for next year. That's how we're thinking about it, right? And there are a few books, I'm just going to hold them up. This one's called Troublemakers. I dug into this for the past 4 or 5 days. It really gives a lens to how we look at student behavior, behaviors of students and the way we're seeing it and how it really manifests in the assumptions we may make, right? Then I don't know which one to call my Bible here, but Cultivating Genius. If you have not gotten this book, I am telling you, and believe me, Dr. Muhammad's not paying me for this. Please invest in this book because it talks about how we can bring what students already have to the classroom. So, and like what inherently our diverse population already is built with. This is extremely important to get away from that disparity narrative. And I am working with this book, 5 Practices for Equity-Focused School Leadership. It's another book that I recommend. We talk about building capacity through the district, right? Because we know the work doesn't just stay at central office. It is about how are we building capacity across the district. That is one book that I am leaning on for that work. There are many people in our districts. I have to say this, like you see the people on the screen, this is my crew, right? I lean on them. Like when you talk about a major resource, we're all on the screen together. This is not something that happens once in a while. We do this on a regular. I will call Gerald. I will call Rosina like, hey, how are you handling this? And hey, how does this work for you? So please don't underestimate that power in networking. And also I work with wonderful people in my district, right? The teachers, the students, my goodness, and like the administrators, they want to do this work, right? When I talked about that bus, they're on it. So I lean on them because I'm not the smartest one in the room, right? That I can learn from everybody from 8 to 80. So that is exactly what I do. So thank you.
And Rosina, can you very quickly tell us a couple of your favorite resources?
Oh man, I think Tanya hit on a lot of them, and Mr. Walton is spitting them in the chat box, so I won't repeat them. I will just say that the one indicator that we know our work within our formal PD structures is working, and it's growing courageous agents. I just want to highlight our BARWI 860. It's called Building Anti-Racist White Educators of Connecticut 860. And they're a self-initiated and self-directed book and discussion group of over 250 educators who on their own time with district support dig in to really expand and deepen their learning and their growth around this work. And a lot of the books and that you two have referenced, that's what they're reading and they're discussing, and they're having these open, honest conversations. 2 other resources, the Castle Framework to engage our students. We pair that with Learning for Justice, social justice domains from the Southern Poverty Law Center, formerly called Teaching Tolerance, and it did gain some unwanted pushback, but we remain unwavered. So that's our pro-social education way of providing all of our students an authentic experience. And then we also lean on the metaphor of Rondon Sims Bishop's mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors as one of our protocols. I can go on and on. I just want to end with this quote. I wish I had it 2 hours ago from my prolific colleague, Gerald. Training doesn't serve as a proxy for change. And so I'm taking that away with me today as I'm thinking about our professional learning and development.
Great, thank you. And I just want to reiterate the value in the resources that you talked about. We will be posting our repository of resources, and I will be talking with all of our panel members today to get your best resources, and we will add those to our repository and post them with this recording when we finish at the end of today on our CAS website. So if you want to use this, I know we've had a question. If you want to use this with your faculty, staff, and in your districts, it will be posted. I'm going to very quickly, because we're running out of time right now, just ask each one of you one last question. So in your briefest answer, I want you to give me your response, because just listening to the 7 of you, I can hear your passion and how important all this work is for you, and you give us hope Civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired hope in his 1963 speech, "I Have a Dream." As we close this portion of our program, I'd like to ask each of you to share your dream. So Gladys, we'll start with you.
Okay. I'm going to also quote from my other idol, Harriet Tubman. And I have a dream that we continue with strength, patience, and passion to reach for the star and change the world for all our students.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gladys. Kevin. Yes, we lost Kevin. Elsie.
Yeah. No,
Here we go.
Yeah, here I am. Yeah. I think my dream is that, kids can come to learn in an environment where it's safe, and that my dream is that people will continue to evolve into understanding that, there is no white superiority and that we are all in this together. But the fact remains that we need to democratize this work and continue. And my real dream is that we had to get rid of the whole concept of DEI, right? If that means we got rid of the whole concept of DEI, that means that we were doing things right. So that would be the dream. I don't want to put anyone out of a job, so you just kind of go do something else.
Elsie.
I share your dream, Kevin. I really dream of a time where equity officers are not needed.
Tanya.
My dream is for every child, person to be fiercely free to be themselves in their own skin.
Beautiful. Gerald.
I remember when Dr. Haskins had me come to West Hartford 10 years ago, and then helped to keep me there. I remember when Kevin and I first met and decided, I think tacitly, without ever saying it, that we would cover each other in meetings around the work for diversifying our workforce by race. I remember when Dr. Claiborne, with no one else knowing, helped me to script every word of what I would say in my first, sort of public concession about the work that we're doing in Newington Public Schools. I remember when Elsie first started working at CREC, one of the first people who actually reached out to me about Elsie was Elsie, that she made no barrier between she and I. I remember in Meridian, when we didn't have any money to actually do so, the district leadership actually brought a group of people from SERC in to sort of tour the work that they were doing very early on for multiple language learners. My greatest hope and vision is that there's a version 2.0 of what I've gotten from everyone here, that, the doors just continue to swing both ways and that we exit with grace, but we leave an open door for other people to make doors for other people, because I'm not here if those other people don't continuously make doors for me. So that's my hope.
Right, Lizette.
So I think my dream for Meridian in this work is, with over 45% of our students identify as Hispanic, Latino, and being Latina myself, who graduated from Maloney, born, raised, and still live in Meridian and work in the Meridian Public Schools, my dream is to provide opportunities for our students to have their voices heard and to see themselves reflected in our staff and in our curriculum.
Great, and Rosina.
So I stand on the shoulders of many kings, and my favorite quote of Dr. King is, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." And so my dream is for every child, in particular those who have been historically underrepresented and underserved, that they experience the kind of peaceful human dignity that comes with living authentically and having all access opportunities to thrive, to succeed, to breathe, to stay alive, and to live fully and free. That is what I dream about. It's what I hope for, and it's also what I pray on.
Great, thank you. And I totally agree with each of you. What a wonderful world it would be if all of your wishes and dreams could come true. And I have to say, Gerald, when you said it's a good thing to be a part of this group, I really want to be a part of your group because I learn so much from you every time that I get to talk with you. So thank you so much, Gladys, Kevin, Elsie, Tanya, Lizette, Gerald, and Rosina, for taking the time to share with us your experiences and help us dive more deeply and explore the critically important issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion from a DEI director and coordinator perspective. There's so much to say and think about, and I hope that we can continue these conversations with follow-up webinars. So thank you for being here. Here's the contact information for our DEI panelists. We'll post the information on our website with the recording of today's summit. Thank you again to our panel for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this morning. And whether you're attending live or viewing the recording of the summit later, and you know of someone already in a DEI position or as a DEI director or coordinator is hired in your district, please send their email address to me, CAS-CIAC.org, and we will make sure that their names are added to the Connecticut DEI database that we have started so that they are invited to the monthly DEI director and coordinator meetings and can become part of this powerful network and receive any communication that's pertinent to their roles and responsibilities. It's now time for a morning break. We went over a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to give you a chance to stretch, grab something to eat and drink, and hope you'll continue to join us for a second half of our summit as we continue to hear the voices from different perspectives about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And right now, we want you to enjoy a good stretch break, and we'll be back at 10:20 with the second half of our program. Welcome back for the second half of the Education Equity Part 3, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion from a Different Perspective Summit. And if you're joining us today, we're glad that you're here. It's now time to continue with our next guest speaker. To introduce her to you, it's my pleasure to welcome another one of our CAS Education Equity Committee members and the Director of Equity and Inclusion from Waterbury, Laura White. Welcome, Laura.
I have such pleasure introducing our Teacher of the Year for the state of Connecticut. On a side note, I actually went to high school with Kim King, so I in some ways wasn't actually that surprised that she had received this award, but I was very happy to learn that she is an educator. And getting on with it, Kim is an elementary art teacher in Mansfield, and as I mentioned, the 2022 Connecticut State Teacher of the Year. Throughout her 12-year teaching career, she has taught students in grades pre-K to 12. Regardless of grade level, she carries with her themes of equity, empowerment, and creativity. As a transracial inter-country adoptee and a parent to an adopted child and a biracial transgender son, Kim has had a profound understanding of intersectionality. She believes that our students see, she believes what our students see and what they're exposed to matters profoundly. Students need to see accurate representations of themselves so that they can imagine a future where they are active contributors. Kim is working with the Make Us Visible Connecticut to contribute to her expertise of Asian American Pacific Islander curriculum. She received her Master's of Art Education from New York University and a Bachelor's of Fine Art from Syracuse University. Recently, Kim was a presenter at the Waterbury Equity is Elementary Conference, where she led sessions to our teachers on intersectionality. She did an amazing job creating a space for teachers to build a better understanding of the relationships between students' identities and the prejudices they face and how teachers can meet those needs. Kim is passionate, she's authentic, she's caring, she's kind, and she is a social justice warrior. So please welcome Kim King.
Thank you, Laura. It warms my heart to have you introduce me today. The work you're doing in Waterbury is an inspiration, and I'm so happy to have reconnected after all these years. And thank you to the Connecticut Association of Schools for prioritizing this work and for inviting me to provide a teacher's perspective on the importance of equity in our schools. I'd like to begin with sharing a part of my story. Aside from being an art educator and the 2022 Connecticut State Teacher of the Year, I'm also a parent, a wife, an ally, an artist, an activist, a Korean adoptee, and an Asian American. I share those identities with you because who we are, our histories, our experiences, all inform who we are as educators. I went through elementary, middle, high school, college, and graduate school without ever seeing a teacher that looked like me. This lack of representation was especially damaging because as an intercountry transnational adoptee, meaning I grew up outside of my race and culture, I didn't see myself reflected in my family, my classmates, my teachers, or even the subjects being taught in school. I was left to try to fill in the pages that were missing from my story and my education on my own. I shaped my idea of what it meant to be Asian in America based on inaccurate depictions in the media and commonly held stereotypes from the adults around me. Some of those adults were my teachers. The first time I saw another Asian person was on the cardboard UNICEF collection box. My teacher told us we had to collect our coins for the poor, unfortunate children starving in China. I immediately felt 30 sets of eyeballs, including my teachers, looking at me with pity. This was one of the first times I experienced that sickening feeling of shame in my identity. But unfortunately, it wasn't the last. That sense of shame stayed with me for the first part of my life. It silently metastasized with every, "Where are you really from?" Or, "Why aren't you good at math? I thought all Asians were good at math." Or, "It's only a joke. Don't take it so seriously." The worst was when my good friends would refer to me as their Asian friend. I wasn't just their friend, I needed a qualifier. But I remained silent, and as we know, silence sometimes can be the most dangerous sound. I began to believe this false narrative of what it meant to be Asian in America. I was guilty of this, so how could I reconcile the people around me doing the same thing? I wasn't able to. I became resigned to being a perpetual foreigner and numb to all the assumptions that followed. I was called Chinese so much that I assumed that I was Chinese and that China and Korea were one and the same. I wasn't alone though. Everyone, including my family and my teachers, were equally as misinformed. It wasn't until I won an art award in 8th grade that my art teacher, Mrs. Helander, gave me a small porcelain bowl. In the note card, she wrote that Korea was famous for its celadon pottery, and you could recognize it by its distinct greenish color. It was like I received the first piece of a puzzle, one that I am still to this day working on completing. Receiving that bit of information was the first time I felt an ember of pride in being Korean. I can't tell you how many times I would look at the simple bowl, running my finger along the rim, wondering about who I was and where I came from. Mrs. Helander wasn't the only teacher who impacted me on my journey of piecing together my identity. I became a US citizen in 2nd grade. To my parents' chagrin, I don't remember going to the courthouse. I don't remember sitting on the judge's lap, and I don't remember the sheet cake that I was told said All-American Girl. What I do remember is my 2nd grade teacher, Sister Eileen. She took a small American flag, the kind you get at a 4th of July parade, and she stuck it in an old beat-up coffee can filled with pebbles and placed it on my desk. That gesture, that small, seemingly insignificant gesture, that act of kindness, I remember that. I remember the feeling of being seen. Teaching is about connections and seeing the humanity of someone else. Our students are the priority. We must center our students, their families, and their communities. I did not see myself reflected in the American experience, our country's history, or even in my school, but hopefully the next generation of students will. They'll see themselves reflected in their teachers and in the content being taught in their classrooms. Representation matters. It's a crucial time where there are cultural and political shifts that are not based on equity and do not center all of our students. Every child deserves an education which treats them with dignity, and for far too long, Black, Brown, Indigenous, LGBTQIA, and immigrants have been invisible in public education. When BIPOC and other marginalized communities are left out of the curriculum, everyone is impacted. All of our children need to see accurate representations of themselves so they can imagine a future where they are contributors. Equity in education means our students can write themselves into the future. We can build the creative capacity of each generation of students to express themselves and speak their truth. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pieces of pottery with gold. There's strength in recognizing our flaws, acknowledging where the cracks are. Repairing by highlighting and not erasing is what will make us stronger. In preparation for this address, I informally reached out to as many colleagues as I could, including other state teachers. When I asked my colleagues about their successes, challenges, and hopes in regards to equity and inclusion, they overwhelmingly said that they hoped that this work remained a priority. They emphasized their commitment to equity and inclusion. They understand the weight and importance of this work and know that creating more equitable education systems and improving equity for all children cannot be solved with a few professional developments a year. There needs to be continued effort to deliberately develop cultural competencies so teachers can meet the needs of each student. Transformation cannot take place without funding, work, collaboration, and time. Everyone agreed. Grounding equity and inclusion in why change was needed was an important first step. The conversations, reflections, learning, and even getting comfortable with the uncomfortable felt productive. Although the conversations were for the most part seen as a success, many teachers remarked there was a lot of talking and not a lot of doing. Some felt it was hard to speak up when confronted with a colleague's blind spots, while another said hard conversations are not comfortable for everyone, so sometimes they only scratch the surface. So the biggest challenge for many is how do we span the distance between those who are at the beginning of this work and those who are ready to engage more deeply. There is a significant community of educators who are ready to take action and want to know what's next. They want to know how will the work get done. Does the absence of BIPOC educators' voices and experiences impact their school's equity work? How does it look like when teaching their specific subject area? How do we accurately measure growth? They want to be sure they're teaching what is important. They want tangible, high-quality instructional material and training. We cannot lead with equity without focusing on and investing on our teachers. Supporting teacher transformation requires giving teachers space to meet the needs of their students. It means designing for systems that are more just and giving teachers space in those conversations. Equity is an approach that asks what students need and puts those needs at the center of educational practice. It requires bravery to act continually on those conversations for our current and future students. Teaching is a radical practice. Teachers want and need clear, regular commitment from administrators that they will be supported in their advocacy. Teachers want to go further. They want to engage students in meaningful conversations, but they are concerned about their support from their administration. Teachers have the power to build creative confidence from within and reflect their students' potential. As an elementary educator, I believe investing Investing our youngest learners is crucial to this work. If we start early and prioritize professional development for elementary educators, it will have a far-reaching impact. I can't leave you today without talking about the importance of creativity as an art educator. There is transformative power in creativity. We have the power to increase engagement, access, and agency for all our students, inclusive of ability, experience, or identity. Creativity validates other ways of thinking. It makes space for students' voice. It embraces multiple points of views. It allows students to learn in ways that support their unique learning styles. It creates opportunities for teachers to connect with students in meaningful and powerful ways. Teaching students to trust and stretch their creative ideas by providing rigorous yet relevant learning opportunities will only help to inspire joy in learning. Creative expression allows students to begin to make sense of the world around them. It helps them to see the value in their own voices and histories. Students can take pride in their own cultural identities and experiences while gaining respect for the people and cultures of others. Creativity can help us work towards creating safe and culturally responsive spaces of learning for all our students. Let's have Connecticut be an example to the nation for what is possible when we recognize the value of differences and the beauty of multitudes. Thank you for this opportunity to share one teacher's perspective on the importance of equity in education. It's an honor to be included in today's summit. Thank you.
And Kim, it's an honor to have you here today with us. Thank you so much. It's great to see you. We were emailing back and forth, so it's great to see your face and to hear you talk. You have so many inspiring words to share with us, but I really appreciated you sharing your experiences with us, and your story is so powerful. Grounding equity and inclusion is very important, as you said. But I think the part that I enjoyed listening to the most was as soon as you started talking about creativity, that smile and that passion came through on your face. And it's so great to see. So thank you so much. I have to say, we're so proud of you and having you representing all of us, especially the Connecticut teachers here. I hope you'll keep sharing your voice, your story, and this message, because it's so important as you go out and talk to people across the country. So thanks, and keep up the great work. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce to you one of my colleagues and friends at CAS-CIAC who will be moderating our high school panel this morning. Henry Rondon is the Assistant Director of Unified Sports and Student Activities. Take it away, Henry.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone who is out there. I'd like to, at this time, thank, first of all, our students for coming on and making sure that they share a little bit about themselves and the work that they're doing and what's going on in the school communities. Obviously, as educators, for us, it's very important to ensure that we listen to our student voices. So what I'm going to have them do at this time is that they are going to introduce themselves, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their school community, how they're involved here at CAS-CIAC, some of the boards that they belong to, and really to give us a little bit of insight into how the work that they're doing here is also coinciding with what's going on in each one of their school communities. So at this time, I will ask Melinda to get us going. Go ahead, Melinda.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melinda, and I'm currently a junior at Amity Regional High School in Woodridge, Connecticut. And for CAS-CIAC, I am part of the Sportsmanship Committee, and I am also part of the Student Equity Advisory Board.
Thank you. Why don't you go ahead, Catherine?
Hello, everybody. I go to Hall High School in West Hartford Public Schools. Our district is, I'm just going to quickly talk about the demographics of my district. We're 11% Asian, 8% Black, about 20% Hispanic Latino, 56% white. A quarter of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and about 13 students have disabilities. I'm part of the State Student Council on Advisory Council on Education, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you. Mahina, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mahina Khan Masadova, and I go to Walton High School. I'm part of the State Student Advisory Council on Education. So some of the demographics of Walton High School are that about 80% of the students are white, 8% are Asian, 6% are Hispanic, and about 2% are Black. About 8% of students are from low-income families, and there's about a 50-50% split between females and males.
Thank you. At this time, Lori, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Lori Maple, and I'm currently a senior at Craig Academy of Aerospace and Engineering in Windsor. I'm a varsity athlete on the volleyball team, and for CAS-CIAC, I'm a member of the Student Equity Advisory Board. My school demographics are 8.8% Asian, 31.3% Black, 37.3% Latinx or Hispanic of any race, 19.1% white, 0.0% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, and also 54% of students can get free or reduced lunch.
Very good, thank you. And finally, Alex, why don't you go ahead?
So good afternoon, my name is Alex Ramnarine. I'm from Pompborough High School in Southbury, Connecticut. Just some quick demographics about our school. 13.1% of the student population at Pompborough are eligible for free or reduced lunch. 4.5% of the student population is Asian. 2.5% is African American, and 7% is Hispanic descent.
Thank you. Thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. So very quickly, let's move on to a little bit of what happens in your school communities. And we'll look at your any clubs that or committees that your schools might have, which entail diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the work that they may do. So if you can tell us the name of these groups, what is it exactly that they're intended to do, and the impact that they may have on your school communities. So Lori, we'll begin with you.
Okay, at my school, we have a GSA Alliance, which is very lively within the high school and middle school, and they conduct meetings between students to talk about the issues that are happening within the community and within the school. We also have a club called Changemakers, which is available to 7th grade students and 9th grade students to teach them about good mental health and how to de-escalate situations, and we're additionally teaching them leadership skills. We also have a club called Breaking Bread, which includes another club called Equity Ambassadors, and we have student-led meetings discussing current issues within our communities and classrooms, and this is formally led by Ms. Jamila Champierre and Dr. Olivia Hussey. We also have the Equity Action Team, which is, as a school, teachers are coming together to talk about issues within the school, considering culture, climate equity, and inclusivity among students. And we also have the Heart, which is home of the Equity Action Resource Team, which is a physical space for social justice groups to meet. It is like a restorative space, and the goal is to make every classroom a restorative space, encourage community among students and teachers, and promote creative learning.
Thank you. That is quite a bit that's going on there. Very good. Melinda, we'll move on to you.
So at my school, it's very open, and they allow students to create their own student organizations. And some of the clubs and student organizations that we have include Diversity in Action, which basically is a culmination of different representatives from different like social clubs. For example, Black Student Union, Asian Activism, and Gay Straight Alliance. We basically come together and conduct 3 events for the community every year. And one of the events that we particularly focus on is going to the middle schools and doing activities and workshops with middle school students so that they get a gist of what they're able to do in high school and accomplish as high school students. And as for one of the organizations that I'm a part of, Asian Activism, we have focused on creating videos to share the Asian American student perspective. And we have shared that and collaborated with campaigns like #Make Connecticut or Make Us Visible Connecticut. And also we have collaborated with WNPR, their radio station, and Dr. Chong from the Yukon Asian American and Pacific Islander Education Center.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, Mahina, we will end with you with this set.
So my school has a number of clubs. So the first one being the Gay Straight Alliance Club, which meets weekly to discuss human rights and topics that affect our society as a whole, with a specific interest in topics involving around LGBTQ community, and it's open to all students. And then we also have Women's Activism Club, which strives to create a safe environment to discuss issues pertaining to women. And they address topics like period poverty, and we have a lot of we do a lot of fundraising for this specific issue, and then women's health and social justice problems, and yeah, so like a lot of the year just organizing and executing fundraisers to support women's issues. We also have a racial equality and diversity club and an international club, and we have something called speak up reminders, which basically encourage students to speak up, and they're monthly, so you could just write what your issues are and then they'd get back to you.
Thank you. That sounds like quite a bit is going on in those school communities, so thank you all for sharing that. Next, would like to know what does your school have in place for students, for pretty much every student to feel included, that they belong, someone who they can go talk to in your building and who they feel will help them take action. And for this set of questions, actually, Mahina, we'll continue with you in terms of, who do people feel comfortable again? We're obviously without having to use any names, but is there a place, is there someone that they can go to in your school community?
So in our school, I would say a large portion of it is clubs, and then teachers, and then faculty, meaning like counselors, and there's also a large number of people using, school psychologists and things like that. I also think there are programs in our school like Buen Amigo, Best Buddies, Link Crew. We also have like festivals and things like that to make people feel welcome and talk more about their culture and their diversity. So like Buen Amigo is for when somebody is transferring into the school and they're like just starting to navigate through like the transitioning process, which is very difficult, and so you'll have like a buddy who will take you around and introduce you to everything. We also have Link Crew, which is for incoming freshmen, and it's completely changed the way freshmen have felt when transitioning into the school, because you have two link leaders, which are like a senior and a junior, who kind of direct activities that help the students feel more welcome to the school and talk about their issues, and they're kind of like there if you have any questions for the students. And for the festivals, we just do things like we have like presentations about different languages and cultures and things like that to always show people that like our school is diverse. There are a lot of different types of people here, and you're not alone if you are one of those people. And I believe I already mentioned the reminders where you can speak up, and that is for staying respectful and talking about any issues you have. But I do think generally a lot of people go to their teachers for help and guidance. I know I had a friend who was having a situation, and she just went to a close teacher and talked to her about her problems. So I believe a lot of the students feel very comfortable with the teachers and the environment, and among the peers, of course, as well. It becomes a little bit difficult with the counselors because there are a lot of students, and the ratio to the counselor student is kind of high. I believe it's like 200 to 1. So that's like, I guess, the only part, but everything else is amazing, where you can go to anybody for help and they're there for you.
Thank you. And Catherine, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your school community?
Yeah, so kind of like Mahina said, our school, the biggest thing that our school has in order for students to feel included, that they belong, and that they have someone to talk to, and then that person will take action for them if that's needed, is Link Crew. This is under the Boomerang Project, and Boomerang Project works with our middle school also and our high school. In middle school, it's called the Web Program, Where Everyone Belongs, and in high school, it's Link Crew. And with these programs, either a junior or a senior is paired with a group of freshmen or underclassmen or transfer students. And before the school year even starts, so that our new students can feel like they're part of our school's community and feel like there are at least 2 people along their new friends that they have in their groups or their squads that they can talk to. And then throughout the year, every week we meet again with our groups. So the seniors and juniors will meet again with their freshman groups to just like reiterate and emphasize that just because people are in different grades, there's still someone who you can talk to, who's there to help you and to give advice. And then another program that our school has is a community program. So every Wednesday we have 20 minutes with our classmates to talk about current events and just have a connection with a teacher instead of students, but have a teacher leader that can talk about social justice and current events, which might be difficult conversations, but with leading these conversations, more people can feel connected and included, and that them as a person can feel they belong in our school and that they are represented.
Thank you. It's great to hear that in both of these school communities that these school leaders are being very proactive about including students when they come in initially, whether they are freshmen or whether they're transferring into the building. So that is really great to hear what is going on in these buildings. And next, I'd like to look at the ability of students to have change in the culture and climate of their school communities or in the community surrounding it. So basically, we would look at these students to give us a little bit of an idea of what is it like in their school communities in terms of when something comes up or they come up with an idea, what is the ability or what functions do you have in order to create this change in their culture and climate? And how do you go about doing this? So Melinda, we'll begin with you in your school community.
So at my school, we have something called Afternoon with Admins, which basically is an opportunity for students to go to these after school like open hour sessions with the whole administrative team. And we just basically pitch out our ideas or fill out a form with any issues that we have and that we want to talk about and get more information on. And during those sessions, it's really great. And it's a really great environment for students to share any ideas, like things that they want to propose doing or things that they think the school needs to do better at. And it also gives the administration the opportunity to hear these proposals and ideas and also kind of tell the students what's actually going on and what are the challenges to implementing these programs. And in addition to this, we have student council. They have a committee on student council, which is principals committee. So during the morning, they also have similar open hour sessions, but they're more intimate and they're with just the principal. And with that, students are able to discuss any issues within the school climate that they have, and students are able to petition for certain proposals that they want to be made.
Very good. Thank you. And Alex, why don't you go ahead?
So within the school, all of our honor societies are student, and they simply have teacher advisors. So that allows students to really field opinions from their fellow peers and come together and then implement those changes on more club level. The same thing with our student council. our student council by 5 of my classmates, and they're able to dictate how prom wants to run. They're able to dictate potential service opportunities, school. So a lot of it student led. But for more substantial changes, I feel like our school could pick up a little bit more on it. So we do have student representatives on our region's Board of Education. So students are able to like field certain opinions and give it to the Board of Ed directly in like a lot of times during Board of Ed meetings. But a lot of the time they are a bit, they do tend to like shut us down, not all the time, but for certain opinions, they more rather focus on the teachers. So there is more potential leeway for more administrators to be more open to student opinions. But as of right now, within the high school, at least, teachers are very receptive and very open to changing certain ways they do things, or even opening more clubs or curriculums.
Thank you. And we'll continue on with looking a little bit more at yourselves and reflecting on, what can you personally do and what can other students do to make sure that all students feel welcome, respected, safe, and included in your communities, and maybe what are your ideas, or maybe what is already happening in your school buildings, as we've heard a few examples. But Catherine, maybe if you can give us a little bit about what would be either your ideas or what is happening in your building that either you or other students can do in this case.
Yes, so I think the main thing is for students to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. I'm the captain of our cross-country and track teams. I think the biggest way I try to connect with kids is to encourage them to join these communities of over 100 kids from all different grades, where after school for 2 hours, you're meeting together, working together, having fun, and there's some stresses of either life, school can go away for 2 hours in your day. And because we are a team environment, feeling included, feeling respected, knowing that you're an important aspect of the team, no matter what ability, no matter how long you've been in the team, no matter your grade, is the most important thing. And it's just meeting your fellow peers where they are, not trying to push them to be something they aren't, is the biggest thing.
Thank you. Very well said. And Alex, why don't you go ahead again?
Yeah, so I really want to echo, sorry, that's my school's bell. I really want to echo the sentiments that Kat mentioned in her speech. Clubs here at Pompano are a really big part of the school community. We have like over 24 clubs, I believe, from debate, ranging to the Link Crew and the theater club. And each club like has their own very strong, tight-knit community. And a majority of the students' class are in a club. So each student does feel like they have a community to belong to. And clubs are also very active in recruiting their members. So you can never someone sitting by themselves at lunch, they'll always be with like a club table. So if I were to make any recommendations, it would be for schools to strengthen the behavior of their clubs and the climate of their clubs, as that's like really the fabric of community. And
Thank you. And I definitely would echo what both of you said, that is a very strong part of school communities. When we talk about these after school regular activities, whether they be sports or clubs, they really do can become a very welcoming part of the community. So it is encouraging to see that definitely your schools are encouraging students to get involved in those. And I know that many of those have those fairs at the beginning of the year to make everyone aware of what they can be part of. But definitely the members of those clubs and sports are those student athletes and students who are part of those clubs are very important to being in the welcoming committee. Just moving on with the students, what more can or should schools do to ensure that all students feel welcome, respected, and be part of the school? So again, we've heard from the last couple of students about what they personally think and what the students themselves can do. But schools themselves as institutions, what can they do in this part to make them feel welcome, respected, and part of the community. And again, we did hear some ideas initially, but we're gonna ask Lori here to come in and talk about what else can happen in the school community.
I feel like in school communities, we should promote more cultural awareness throughout the building. Like I know in my school, we have bulletin boards around the school promoting, like we had one for Women's History Month that is coming for an end. During February, we had 2 bulletin boards it was a board full of Black scientists and inventors who had created things that have impacted us greatly today. I feel like as a state, we should have more teachers that are an accurate representation of the students within the building. Because I know I go to a correct school. My school was based off the Chef versus O'Neill case, bringing students from the Hartford area into schools that are in more suburban areas to get a better education, but we see mainly teachers who are white and not people of color, and our schools are basically made mostly of people of color. So I feel like that representation would really benefit, just like how Ms. King was saying, it really impacts student mind to see someone like you doing great things in life and teaching us things, and encourages us to think that we can be something and do better than what our parents have done. I feel like we should have more cultural events. I know our sister correct schools, they do like Black History Month events where it's like an assembly for like half the day, and the entire high school and middle school, they're coming together and doing activities, celebrating stuff. And it's not just for Black History Month. We could have for Spanish Heritage Night, Asian, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander night, or activities throughout the day, because I know it's really hard to get transportation after school for certain students. I feel like we should offer more clubs and activities that allow students to express themselves and their interests. So more student led clubs. I feel like certain schools, they give the opportunity, but they don't really encourage it amongst students. Students tend to keep to themselves, especially in today's society. Most students like on their phones, they have jobs after school. I feel like we should promote more things like that so students can feel more attracted to school and not pulling away to make it feel like it's such a jail to be here. I also feel like during PDs, we should have student panels coming up, because to make changes in our school based on our grades and what students are behaving like, it's best to hear from the students, because the student perspective is never going to be the same from what a teacher sees. Students are hearing things that the teacher will never hear, just like how we're doing now. If this was available at every PD for every school, I feel like schools would be much more of a place that where students enjoy and they don't feel held captive. For example, in my school, we just started a no tolerance phone policy. So if your phone's out, it gets brought down to the office. And if you like provide any type of pushback, you get an automatic OSS, or you get sent home. I feel like that is a huge problem, because for seniors, we are students like applying for scholarships, applying to colleges. If colleges are seeing suspensions and things like that for something as simple as not putting your phone away, because what if your parent is texting you? I feel like that's a huge impact that's way beyond what we need to do. I feel like we should instill more restorative practices and not zero tolerance policies.
Thank you. Great. And Mahina, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, that was really well said, Lori. Just to add on to that, I agree with everything she said. Honestly, I don't know what else to add besides what's been happening in our school, which is, for example, for Black History Month, one of the clubs decided to announce like a quote from a person, like a person who is Black, who has who's like a Black important figure and in history, and they were just announcing quotes every single day on the announcements, and then we would have the pledge afterwards, and it was very eye-opening, because like hearing about all of these different people that you might not learn about every single day just for at least 1 month, and doing things like that, like for Women's History Month and whatnot, what else there is, it would be really great for the school to keep an open mind and be willing to learn. We also have when you walk up the stairs of our school in the entrance, we have like this area where there's a bunch of historical information about Black Americans and what they've invented and things like that. So those are great things. Additionally, incorporating like festivals, like Lori mentioned, we have something called a festival or the festival, and it's basically students who are from different backgrounds, different cultures, know different languages. They come in and they try to, inform the student body of those different languages and cultures. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say besides everything she said. Just echo all of that. That was great.
No, those were both by both of you very good examples of what you would like to see schools do. No doubt. And finally, we'll finish with the students and let them give a little more extended statement here into their school communities, or maybe if they envision, if we would say, the perfect school community, and maybe they already exist in such a community. And I would ask each student really to describe what if your school were the one place that you couldn't wait to get to in the morning? You couldn't wait to get up, you had a hard time sleeping because you were so excited about going to school, and you hated to leave the school at night after your club, your practice, whatever it may be. What would that look like and sound like and feel like to you? And that is a loaded question, but definitely would love to hear what their perspectives are. So, Catherine, we're going to start with you.
I love this question, and not that my school doesn't have this already, but I think just if every single student, every single teacher, administrator, staff members have respect for every single person they encounter in a day, just treating people with respect, I think leads to all the other traits that we're fighting for. And without without respect, no one would want to be in the buildings that are trying to build our future in our state and our country.
Thank you. We will move on to Alex. Why don't you go ahead?
So I just want to preface this by saying the teachers, the guidance counselors, all the clubs at my school are absolutely amazing. But one thing I would like to see more of would be more community engagement. So just being more like open to just like random pop-ins, or if teachers were to be more responsive almost, or more available. I feel like if students want to feel accepted in the building, they have to be constantly engaged and challenged and just feel like it's a place where they can have their mind expand. And to do so, we should have more responsive, not more responsive, more open administrations where we can just pop into the guidance counselors, where we can pop into a teacher and just strike up a conversation. Our guidance counselors are really helpful, but the one thing is that they have a really rigid appointment schedule. So if you don't book an appointment with them, it's really impossible for you to meet with them. Same thing with our teachers. So I would just like it to see just a more open and a more free-flowing kind of building where teachers and students can have a more friendly relationship rather than a more strict teacher-student relationship.
Thank you, Alex. Mahina, we'll move on to you.
Yeah, I wanted to add on with what Alex said and what Kate had said previously. I think respect is a really important aspect of bringing people together. If you don't have respect, that's the baseline for a relationship, in my opinion. And I think there has to be effort on both sides. So not just the students, but also the faculty, or not just the faculty, but also the students. There are so many people who are very engaged in their after school activities and whatnot. And sometimes it's really hard to, understand what people are going through and everything without, I don't know how to explain this in really well, but sometimes there's a lot of judgment that comes with certain things that students do. And so in a lot of cases, people are not open-minded and they don't speak about their issues, and they don't really know the full story until they've discussed that with the student. So I think open-mindedness and respect, and not saying rude or harmful things to people without really understanding the full context of their situation or what's happening is really key.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Melinda, why don't you go ahead?
Just to close it off, something that would be really, that I'd like to see in my school to make it like a really great place to be is I love school because it's a learning environment where I get to learn new things every single day. And I feel like as a student, there are some topics that aren't taught in school that I'd like to see taught in school. For example, I'm Asian American and I'd like to see courses that are more targeted towards the history of my heritage. So I feel like having a way for students to submit requests on what courses the school could offer is something that I'd really like to see and I hope will happen in the future. And I think it would make school a really great place for students to both learn and develop as human beings.
Thank you. And Lori, we will finish with you.
My perfect school would have classrooms that are more comfortable and geared towards students, not such harsh lighting, more comfortable, like posters on the wall promoting inclusivity and equity towards everybody. And that's not too controversial with two point of views, because I understand politics is not allowed in schools. I would, my perfect school would have more funding like that's allotted just for change that involves diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because I know we have the Heart, which is only one classroom, but if every classroom was a space that promoted talking about social injustice and issues, I feel like students would be more engaged. Every school should have more social workers. We understand that there's guidance counselors who handle like grades, college, and speak with their parents, but we also need social workers, more social workers just for talking about issues, because not everyone's parents believes in therapy or has the money or their insurance does not cover therapy. So if we had more therapists or social workers within the school, that would also be great. And more religious acceptance. There are a lot of Catholic students who would like to pray during the day, not like we have like a class for praying, but like prayer room, something like for students who in Eid, there are Muslim students who have to pray every day. There are Jewish students who have to practice their religious things, more religious acceptance throughout the schools everywhere for not just schools related to their religion, like Catholic high schools or Jewish high schools or things like that.
Thank you. Catherine, Alex, Mahina, Melinda, and Lori, I cannot say enough about what you just told us, the sharing of your school communities, some of your beliefs, some of what you would like to see happen in schools. Hopefully our audience out there was able to take some of the ideas that you just gave us and implement that. And again, and because that's what at the end of the day, this is all about. It's all about not only sharing ideas, but coming up with action plans and taking action. So for all of you students, thank you for sharing. And I will turn it over to Rosie to continue this great conference. Thank you to everyone.
And thank you, Henry. And thank you, students. Wow. All I can say is wow. Even though all of you have what sounds like wonderful schools and wonderful places already in your school, and you're doing so many great things, I love your ideas for the perfect school, and I want what you want. And I know that there are so many great suggestions just in your describing what that perfect place might look like, sound like, and feel like. So thank you for sharing those along with so many strategies. I have to say, every time I listen to you, and I was able to meet with you before we did this panel, and I know it's going to be great, but every time I listen to you speak, I am inspired. And I definitely appreciate each of you being here with us this morning and sharing your insights, your ideas, and your voices. I hope you'll keep advocating for what you believe in, no matter where life takes you, and continue to speak up and share those voices, because what you're saying is so powerful. The world needs you. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you another one of our CAS Education Equity Committee members, Principal of Ashford School in Ashford, and the next Superintendent for North Stonington Public Schools, Troy Hopkins. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, Rosie. For the perspective of a superintendent, it is my pleasure to introduce Kevin L. Walston, a proven educational leader with experience bringing people together to achieve a shared vision. Appointed superintendent of Danbury Public School District in August 2021, he's responsible for the education of more than, now listen to this, 12,000 students in 13 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 comprehensive high school, 1 alternative high school, 1 alternative 6 through 12 school, 2 pre-kindergarten programs, and an adult education program that serves the Danbury region. Wow, that is a big job, Kevin. Mr. Walston's career in education began over 22 years ago, previously serving as the district's assistant superintendent since July of 2018. He served in urban school districts in the state of Connecticut for 12 years, including as a turnaround principal and director of schools. Prior to coming to Connecticut, Mr. Walston taught in the New York City public school system as a social studies teacher and assistant principal. Mr. Walston earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Black Studies from the City University of New York in New York City, and later earned a master's degree in administration and supervision from the College of New Rochelle and his professional diploma in school district administration, also from the College of New Rochelle. With equity and access as his guiding principle, Mr. Walston is committed to ensuring that all students receive a high-quality education in partnership with the community and families. Mr. Walston knows how to leverage this work, including utilizing a powerful and comprehensive Board of Education policy. Mr. Walston is also the father of two beautiful children, Noah C. Walston and Kayla Mae Walston, who recently graduated from Florida State University. Welcome, Superintendent Walston.
Mr. Hopkins, thank you so much for that great introduction. I really appreciate the enthusiasm. And also just want to also give thanks to the students who presented prior to me. And I'd love for them to know that we will certainly be considering their thoughts as part of our ongoing planning here in Danbury Public Schools. Thank you for really excited to be a part of this morning. So I have a question, and the question that was presented to me is to talk about equity here in our district, and just in terms of our perspective, how we're implementing equity here in the district. And give me 1 second and see if I can't share my screen. And I will start here. And so again, my name is Kevin Walston, recently appointed superintendent of schools in Danbury in August of 2021. Prior, as Troy had mentioned, I was assistant superintendent in the district for 3 years prior. I want to open with talking about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a leadership vision. Here in the district, dating back almost 4 years now, 5 or 6 years now, sorry, the district prior to my arrival had applied for a grant through Nellie Mae to uncover some of the obstacles that were stopping students of color from realizing the same student outcome success as their peers. And so we began to interview families, teachers, students, administrators across the district, and was able to look at that data to begin to think about how the district can improve outcomes for kids across the system. This work during the 18 and 19 school year, Dr. Sal, our previous superintendent, had charged my office and a couple of other offices with revisiting our district plan and revisiting that plan so that it could be operationalized in a way so it could be meaningful for teacher practice, for leadership, administrative leadership moves across the district. And as part of our process, we decided it was best to fold in our DEI work on the heels of our Nellie Mae study, fold in our DEI work with our strategic plan. And during the entire time, my plan was to make sure DEI lived in our strategic plan, to make sure it was embedded in our work. And so prior to the pandemic in March 2020, we were looking for actual approval on our strategic plan. And the pandemic, well, it kind of hurt that planning and trying to get this in front of the board. And so we decided to pause on asking the board to take action on the plan and decided it was best to revisit the district strategic plan on the heels of the pandemic, and we felt strongly that we are there now. And so what you're going to find in these next few slides is an overview and what we see as the components of a leadership vision, what I see as the components of a leadership vision by incorporating DEI in every aspect of our strategic plan. And so in December of 2019, as part of this journey, it was important for us to make sure that the Board of Education and was also very acceptant and was supportive of our work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in Danbury Public Schools. And through policy is how the board supported this movement. And so we had a board-approved policy in December of 2019. And from that policy, we pulled out some language, which now serves as an excerpt for a district equity statement, which I will share with you shortly. The next bullet talks about developing a vision and mission. These two mission, vision, and mission statements make it very clear our passion and our vision to make sure we are addressing the needs of all students in Danbury Public Schools. Last but not least, establish priorities into our district strategic plan that includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so here you will see, as I had mentioned previously, a commitment to equity and excellence. Danbury Public Schools, we demonstrated this by committing to our equity and diversity policy in 2019. And then as part of our strategic planning process, we agreed on one simple statement, and that is Danbury Public Schools aspires to advance all learners to their highest potential. And in all of our correspondence that we send out, all is emphasized in our language. My parents have used that same language with me when talking about meeting the needs of their own kids. And this language, this line is really, I think, our entire school community has adopted this vision as their own to make sure that in Danbury, when we say all, we mean all. And so to help operationalize the vision, we have a mission statement that we feel strongly in partnership with families and community. This is what makes it happen. And we provide transformational learning experiences for our students, and those learning experiences in our eyes also is for our staff as well. And then here's the equity statement that I referred to earlier, but it speaks to our commitment to engaging in practices that meet the needs of all students. And we do this by opening our doors and welcoming families in partnership, partnering with the community to help realize great student outcomes here in Danbury. And again, this is the time we feel like on the other side of the pandemic, this is the time to start this work. And so the guiding principles for our strategic plan you will find here. And we have 5 guiding principles, one on teaching and learning. Obviously, this is the more critical one for us as a community. Talent acquisition in terms of how we go out and recruit. And when speaking to some of the students, and I'm hearing their responses, I couldn't help but think about some of the priorities and guiding principles that we've identified. We're talking about talent acquisition, recruiting and employing and retaining culturally competent workforce, particularly one that reflects the diversity of our community, which is very diverse. School culture, promoting a welcome and nurturing school culture focused on developing meaningful relationships. We endeavor to do this in a variety of ways, whether it's in person, whether it's virtually. The district has just recently invested in programs to try to promote and encourage our families to have a better, even more meaningful connections to our teachers and our principals. And this is in the form of Parent Square, for those of you who might be familiar with some of these platforms, a new website that is underway and should be ready by July 1st. So we're very excited about these things. Professional capacity, develop effective leaders and teachers through relevant job-embedded PD, professional learning. Again, the district has invested in this as well. We're placing a specific and particular focus on principal development, and then as part of our theory of action, and and recognizing and acknowledging how important the instructional core is. Our principals and our teachers are the folks who we need to make sure are most supported in this process. And so we will make sure that our strategic plan is focused on those two classifications of staff to make sure we can get the most out of our students. And last but not least, operations, fiscal responsibility, and advocacy. And this is about resource allocation and make sure and find formulas to support schools based on need and not just simply based on numbers. And here are the 6 priorities of our district vision: teaching and learning, staff development, talent acquisition, school climate, meaningful collaboration, and resource allocation. And a little bit about the first one. And so teaching and learning, we will provide equitable learning environments and experiences that are rigorous, inclusive, and culturally responsive, that prepare learners for post-secondary success. And I mentioned earlier, we had started work on the strategic plan prior to the pandemic and paused during the pandemic, again, feeling that it was more appropriate to revisit the plan on the other side of the pandemic. But even prior to full approval by the board, we had made moves in this direction to make sure we are providing rigorous, inclusive, and culturally responsive learning environments for our students. One of our biggest investments prior to the pandemic was working with NYU Metro Center. In that work, we adopted a rubric in how, well, one, our teaching and learning and curriculum office, all of our administrators received initial training from New York NYU Metro. As part of that training, it was shared with us kind of our responsibility to make sure we're providing a culturally responsive curriculum. And one of our first charges for our curriculum department was to revisit the ordering of textbooks, specifically books that our kids read in grades 1 through 5. And so if you walk in our elementary classrooms right now and look on classroom libraries, we have 60+% of our student population who identify as Latinx and or Portuguese. And the books in our classrooms in those libraries now look like our students. And so whether they're Black, Brown, Asian, those books in our classrooms look like our students. And that is because our curriculum office went through an exercise and have adopted a rubric that helps to guide those purchases moving forward, as well as a similar rubric is in place to guide experiences in our curriculum. And so you are seeing the high level goal for each strategy, but under each strategy are action steps. Under each goal are additional strategies and action steps to help us realize this goal. What I just shared with you is one of our examples. Staff development. We would develop and enhance the skills of our educators and competencies of all district staff through a lens of cultural responsiveness to reach the needs of our diverse learners. And prior to the pandemic, the district, we invested considerable time in restorative practices. Again, one of the words that I heard one of our students mention prior to my presentation. In addition to the restorative practice work, we had also began to work through New York NYU Metro. We worked on bias training as well, and frankly had the success just in terms of beginning to change hearts and minds with our administrative staff. The restorative work started with our administrators as well, and then we got deeper into the system in which we asked and required the principals to share several models with their staff during the 1920 school year. And we're very proud of them and our staff engaging in this work. Talent acquisition, and this one is a big one for us. I would say that we really need to be a lot more intentional about this work and the way we go out to recruit. And that recruitment also requires this is not only looking at how we recruit and doing this more intentionally, but also making sure and standardizing questions for any potential staff member in this district, making sure we're asking questions that help to elicit whether or not the people who we are hiring embrace diversity the way we do, because it is very important for us here in Danbury Public Schools. And so it's important that we employ and retain culturally responsive workforce because we truly embrace the diversity in this community. The school climate, this one is another important one for us. We just had a training with our principals and family liaisons over the last 2 weeks. And certainly will be one of the many action steps under school climate to make sure it's safe, number one, but two, make sure our families and make sure our students feel safe. And then last but not least, make sure our staff feel safe and safe coming to school every day. And so we just invested in a Welcome in Schools protocol district-wide. Every single school was represented at the meeting, and very proud of the principals and their respective leadership teams. And we will be inviting, I believe, led by CREC, inviting CREC into our schools through a welcoming committee team, getting the feedback to make sure that our families feel welcome, that our students feel welcome, that our staff feel welcome, and getting feedback so that we can make the adjustments necessary to make sure our community does indeed feel welcome. Our doors have been reopened since masks have been optional in district, but we fully anticipate in the fall that we'll have even more families coming back to schools, and we want to make sure our doors are welcome all schools are welcome for everyone. Meaningful collaboration, and this has been another very important one for us. We will partner with families, communities, and the public and private sectors to foster vested interest in schools and collectively create opportunities for deeper engagement. And of course, all of our goals are about improving student outcomes. But this one's important to us because we feel strongly that during the pandemic, we were able to connect with families in ways we were not able to prior to the pandemic. We began to leverage our ability to have Zoom meetings and remote meetings, not terribly different the way we're doing right now. We were able to engage more families during the pandemic, and we intend to capitalize on that momentum. And so whether it's through our recent investments in Parent Square, inviting more families in through our website, or making sure that our principals and our teachers have multiple ways to engage families, and not just the expectation that families can make it in the building for a meeting. And so our principals and our teachers are slowly getting all of the resources they're going to need to be able to engage our families. Parent Square, unfortunately, in our district hasn't been fully implemented yet, but in time will be. We're seeing that as a significant leverage point moving forward. And then, of course, we have Zoom and Google Meets, which a lot of our parents have certainly invested in. And so the hybrid way of engaging our families has been really beneficial, specifically with our parents. But we're hoping to do this in a more meaningful way as we move forward. And last but not least, we've been working really hard, particularly during the grants provided by the federal government, the American Relief Grants. We've been working really hard to establish transparency in our budgeting process, making sure we've gotten in front of families, making sure we've gotten feedback from our buildings. And I mean, we're nowhere near perfect in this regard, but we have every intention of making sure we've established a transparent and coherent budget process. And most importantly, to make sure that we're allocating buildings in an equitable fashion to make sure our buildings get what they need to help support staff to get the best possible outcomes from students. And so this is what we're calling our coherence wheel. And so on the outer core, you will see the 6 strategies that we have identified to help move this district forward. With that is our strategic plan and the Board of Education. And of course, they supervise me through the strategic plan. Our Inquire, Act, and Prepare is what we call here our data-wise process. And this is to continue to get feedback regarding student outcomes so that we can react and support teachers and school leaders. But ultimately, it's this instructional core that's at the center of our attention. And we intend to do everything in this plan to make sure that core is supported in our work moving forward. And that is it for my presentation.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today and for joining us and sharing your insights and your perspectives on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have to tell you, I love your coherence wheel. I think that's a very great, like just a model, that graphic organizer for people. And I especially love how you presented your strategic plan and your priorities, because I think all of that is going to serve for a model for other districts across the state moving forward. So a lot of great work that is happening in Danbury, and I greatly appreciate you sharing that with us this morning. So, and for being here.
Thank you, Rosie. I appreciate your time this morning. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
And I have to tell you, I have a shout out to Rogers Park Middle School. What you don't know is that I've spent several days in the school at different times for different activities. And there are some amazing things happening at Rogers Park. And so for everyone listening this morning, they're going to get to hear more about Rogers Park Middle School in just a few minutes, but just a lot of great work and a great school there. And I know that Danbury is moving forward, and a lot of that is due to you, Kevin, at the helm. So again, thank you for being here this morning and sharing your work with us.
Thank you, Rosie. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And just a quick announcement, because we forgot to share this with you before when we had the students on, but the Student Equity Advisory Board, and you were able to hear some of them this morning, will be presenting to the State Board of Education on doing their final presentation on May 23rd. So you may want to tune into that one, and we'll have more information about that posted on our CAS website. And now to shine a spotlight on 3 amazing Connecticut schools and the work that they're doing. Here's my friend and colleague, Dr. Bill Silva, the Associate Executive Director for CAS. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate the introduction. And I'm happy to be here today. I want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers. And I will be moderating the school spotlight session. And that will feature the important diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's happening at 3 Connecticut schools. And our first school that we'll hear from is Benjamin Franklin Elementary School in Meridian with Principal Joanne Conti. And I will ask Joanne and her team to turn on their video and unmute themselves and begin to share your screen for your presentation. And welcome, and so happy to have you as part of our Equity Summit this morning.
Good morning. I think you can hear me, but you can't see me. I'm not sure, Bill, if you gave me video access, but I can see my 2 colleagues. Tammy Johnson-McGee is my school psychologist here at Franklin, and Amy Frederick is my social worker. And they are going to discuss and share what we do here at Benjamin Franklin Elementary School with diversity, equity, and inclusion for our SEL, social emotional learning time.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting us to speak. We certainly love what we do, and we're very proud of the work that we do in the area of social emotional learning as it relates particularly to diversity, equity, and inclusion for all of our students. My name is Amy Frederick. I am the school social worker. I have been a social worker for 36 years. The last 22 have been in schools, 13 of which have been here at Ben Franklin. Prior to that, I worked for 14 years in healthcare settings as a social worker. But certainly, you know, my love of being in schools has been amazing. And I get to talk to children all day, and it's the best job in the world. So thank you for inviting me.
And good morning. When I think about equity, I think about making information available to everyone. And as for diversity, I am the personification of it. I am Tammy Johnson-McGee, school psychologist at Benjamin Franklin Elementary. And I've worked in 3 different elementary schools in the district during my 20+ years in Meridian, and have loved every minute. I have said that as a school psychologist, I have the best of both worlds. I work with children and I get summers off. I began my love and work in New York City, where I happened into the job after the birth of my son and giving up my post as the deputy director for the New York City Department of Correction Health and Mental Health Division to work as a middle school special education teacher before transitioning to the school psychologist role. This gives me a unique background that has helped me to understand classroom needs and how to apply social emotional strategies in ways that speak to school staff and clinicians. So when Ms. Frederick asked to form this partnership to help the youngest learners, I was all in. So please get ready for Amy to share the award-winning SEL project and her vision actualized.
Okay, well, several years ago, we had noticed that a number of our students in 4th and 5th grade were having a lot of difficulty managing really strong emotions. They couldn't resolve their conflicts with peers. They were having essentially temper tantrums at 9 and 10 years old. And so I had the opportunity in 2017 to attend a leadership conference over the summer where we saw a school that was utilizing some strategic learning in kindergarten to work on some of these executive functioning and social emotional skills. So I came back, I talked with Tammy Johnson-McGee, I talked with the special ed teacher, Mrs. Boyer for kindergarten, and we decided to come up with a curriculum, and we utilized the standards from the Connecticut components of social, emotional, and intellectual habits to create a rubric. This would allow us to track data, because as you know, schools love data. So these were the skills that we saw that were lacking as children grew older. This abilities to manage strong emotions, respond appropriately when someone else has a strong emotion, resolving conflicts with peers, strategies to focus in the face of distraction, demonstrating how choices between connections between their choices and outcomes, and then developing a positive self-worth and self-awareness. And what we chose to do were what the teachers for each student in kindergarten rated these children in the fall, mid-year, and spring. And this, I love this sheet because this shows you clear data. Now, at the beginning in the fall, if you look at the 3 columns kind of to the right, it says fall. You see the kids were all over the place. We had one child coming in at a 24, which is the highest you can get. This shows you that kids are truly coming in with diverse backgrounds in the area of social and emotional learning and managing themselves and executive functionings. We had a lot of students, 12 students were needing the maximum support. We had 3 students that fell at the lowest level, which is 6s and 7s. And the kids were scattered all over the place. By mid-year, we had no children needing max supports. We had 3 children that had moved up to exceeding, and other students had moved into the intervention area and meeting as well. By the spring, we had only 10 students who were not meeting or exceeding out of the 50 students. So it shows you over the progress of the year that this direct instruction in these specific targeted areas really helped move children more so that they had a more balanced background. Those that maybe didn't come in with the knowledge and skills of how to manage these things were provided at school so that they can all move forward from kindergarten with some similar skills and information.
So what happened for us is after 4 years of completing the kindergarten lessons in the classroom, we handed it off to the classroom teachers. We were able to create the lessons virtually because of the pandemic everyone talks about. And we had online links and all of the materials. So it was easy enough to transfer the information and we could continue. We also noticed that some students entered our school already having the skills while others didn't and needed that maximum support. But providing the skills in kindergarten wouldn't help those first graders that entered our school at the same levels. So we extended our lessons for review in first grade to allow us to equalize the playing field for all students in grade 1. And then we also provide lessons for students in upper grades using second steps and other social skills curriculum. So we're actually being thoughtful in helping those students who are new to our school entering first grade using the same curriculum that we used in kindergarten and reviewing it in a higher level. And then because of the distance learning, we were able to provide more instruction and then pass it on to the upper grades. We also provided a newsletter for kindergarten that helped and modeled for parents at home, giving them the same verbiage that we were using and accompanying the stories. So here is a sample of a letter. And if you'll notice, if you become angry or when you're feeling angry, we talked about if something was bugging you. And so we asked students to use specific language. So they said, please stop. I don't like it when, and listed what they were angry about. Also, it makes me upset because, and I get angry when, and then they were able to support each other and parents had the same language. So Ms. Frederick, we're up to the Sherry Minor, and I will hope it marries up together.
Yep. I think you just got to click up top for the tab to get back to the tab for the presentation. Yeah, we do use a lot of the stories from the Sherry J. Miners series, which not only give a lot of good language and the children enjoy the stories, the children in the story are very diverse, so it lets children see representations of themselves in the stories. And then what we do from those stories is that we create the posters. As you saw, we had the Bug Me poster. We create other posters that then allow the teachers hang around the classroom, not only in kindergarten, but in first grade as well. So they continue to have these visuals that support them to remind them of what they can do and how to solve problems. One of the examples you'll see when Ms. Johnson-McGee is able to get to our slide is we have, see, there's some of the posters. We have how to talk out a problem. What is empathy? The sharing one is a great one because kids know what sharing is, but there's a lot of ways to share. And so we go over, and those pictures are right out of the Sherry J. Miners story that talks about sharing and different ways to share. So we hang these in kindergarten and first grade so that they have these as reminders with the visuals, so that if they're not reading yet, they have the pictures with that they can remind them that, and the teachers can refer to them. And so the supports are there throughout the day, every day. It's not just our lesson time, it's all day, all week long. They're just provided with these supports on a daily basis. I happen to be in our Sage Room. We were lucky, we were very blessed through the Jesse Lewis Choose Love Foundation and the Bon Giovanni family here in town. We were provided with funds that allowed us to open the Sage Room. The color of the room is sage green, which is a very calming color. And it's a place for students to practice mindfulness. We do lessons in here. We can take individual students in here who need supports. And it's just an area of where students can learn how to self-regulate and calm themselves. And I'm going to let Ms. Johnson-McGee talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. The Sage Room is a wish come true and an idea that was supported by our wonderful building leader, Joanne Conti, from its inception. The ability to remain calm when faced with stress or frustration is a gift. And this space is the place where students can begin to learn how to do that. The room is designed, you can see here, is designed to provide that space and the tools that we use to help them to learn to manage their feelings and their emotional responses. We have stations set up and they integrate sensory and mindfulness practice, and the students rotate through the stations. They conduct body scans and they have visualization activities during their time in the room. The classes are scheduled for 15 to 30 minutes in the space, and they rotate out through each station. And if you all of these encourages more thoughtful actions and overall more appropriate behavior in school and strategies that help them throughout the day, throughout their life, throughout their experiences. And we're very proud of the use of the space. We've been able to use it this year, and there are classes that rotate through the space. And unfortunately, we want more in, and so hopefully now that we're unmasked and just sanitizing, we'll get more students in over the spring, especially given assessment time and practice coming up. So that might be stressful. They'll be able to work those things out. And I hope we met our time, but thank you for your attention and or any questions and comments. You can contact us, or back to you, Bill.
Thank you so much. Terrific presentation, and very excited for the work that's happening in Meridian and at your school in particular. And we appreciate your sharing it with us and for providing your contact information in case folks who are watching have some additional questions or would like to get some ideas for themselves how they can move forward with similar kinds of programs. So again, thank you. It's now my pleasure to ask our middle school presenters from Rogers Park Middle School in Danbury to get their presentation ready to go with their principal, Dr. Christy Zaletta, who will bring on her team in order to share with us the good work that's happening in Rogers Park in Danbury. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really honored to be able to speak today. Thank you so much for allowing us to do so. Principal at Rogers Park Middle School, as Bill said. I'm one of 3 amazing middle schools here in Danbury. I'm really proud to be a part of that team. Thanks, Rosie, for that shout out. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the 2nd Harbor Me Book Club Student Exchange here at Rogers Park with our new friends from Scotts Ridge Middle School. And I'm here this morning, excuse me, with a team of colleagues to speak to you about our first year implementing Project Adventure through PE class in collaboration with our PPS staff. So while I worked with Dana and our other assistant principal, Jessica, to plan this with input from our PE department head, the educators on this panel have actually been doing all the hard work. So at this time, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
My name is Dana Perez. I'm one of the assistant principals at Rogers Park Middle School. I'm waving. I unfortunately can't turn on my camera, but hi, everybody.
Hi, I am Dana Williams. Same, I can't turn my camera on, but I am one of the physical education teachers at Rogers Park Middle School.
Good morning. My name is Justin Fosher. I'm in the same situation with the cameras, but I am one of the PE teachers at Rogers Park Middle School as well.
Good morning. My name is Dante Curry. I am also one of the PE teachers at Rogers Park Middle School, and I'm having the same issue. I can't turn on my camera.
I am Tom Farrell. I'm one of the counselors here at Rogers Park, and I just got rights to turn on my camera.
Hi, I'm Karina Chelso. I'm one of the school social workers here at Rogers Park, and I can't turn my camera on either. There you go.
Thanks, everyone. Like all other educators in schools across the nation, we've been doing our best to address the great social emotional needs of our students as they return to full day in-person learning this year. As we all know, SEL isn't something else. It's really embedded in all that we do. At Rogers Park, we strive to provide experiences and opportunities for all of our students to meet with success and to continuously improve upon themselves so that they can become the best versions of themselves. As a school community, we've been working for a couple of years now to become more restorative and to become culturally responsive. We've engaged in professional learning around restorative practices and have been putting together professional learning plans, which were disrupted by the pandemic, but that we jumped back into and are now actively learning together through a faculty book study on culturally responsive teaching in the brain by Zaretta Hammond. When we take a look at who we are as a school community, we are really proud of our diversity. and the students that we engage with each and every day. We have around 1,100, not 1,000, students that represent many different countries of origin, different language that are spoken in our school. And so sorry, it's really messing up here. And we work together to try to bring all of them together so that they can interact in an appropriate manner with one another and learn how to deal with the ups and downs of being in middle school. As everyone knows, middle school is a crazy time. None of us would go back to it if we had to. And with the pandemic, we've really seen this super rise in students' impulsivity, excuse me, and inability really to have the skill set to deal with conflict and make good choices moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to the team of educators that have been really the practitioners at this endeavor to describe why we chose to go into this direction, what it is, and how it's going. So Tom?
Hi. So I'm one of the counselors here, and I think for us, just looking at why we decided to engage in this kind of learning, I think the biggest thing that really stands out to me on this page is authenticity. Kids really crave that authentic interaction now. The pandemic took a lot of, as Dr. Gonzalez said, the impulsivity, the coping skills, the ability to handle these conflicts when they arise has just not been there. The mask covered up some of that, and we've struggled really getting back into it. So this is a response to some of the trauma. We had students who were caretakers for baby brothers and sisters. We had students dealing with issues in the home. So this is a response for us to give them that authentic social emotional opportunity to help build up that self-esteem again, to give them that ability to trust in themselves and to create independent learners. I think that's been one of the biggest things, is wanting to move these students away from that dependency of having to always have someone else do something for them. Because as we move forward, as they continue to move through middle school into high school, their accountability goes up, their responsibility goes up. So this program has really helped with some of that. It also has really helped develop leadership skills. Some of our students who have a lot of discipline referrals, who have struggled really reintegrating into the school community and the climate, have turned out to be some of our best participators, our strongest participants, and some of the best leadership as well in those opportunities. So we're going to go to the next slide. So what is adventure-based learning? To put it super simply, it's the use of games, structured activities. Usually we phrase it as like a challenge to them. And it's going to involve them trusting each other, problem solving together. They're going to have to take a risk with each other. And I think as we talk about kind of the flow of the program, you'll see that early on, we do a lot of relationship building. We do a lot of learning about each other and being authentic with each other, because it's really hard for students to engage with us if they just feel like we're just there as a job. This is our world right now, and we want to show them that we're involved in their world. It's also going to give them those critical thinking skills to be able to attack problems in a different way. As we know, there are different pathways to the same goal. So not every single way that we take is always going to be the right way. We're going to have to pivot. We're going to have to change our thought process at times. And what we've seen so far with our Project Adventure Learning is that we've been giving them that opportunity to work with each other. So we'll talk about a little bit of the nuts and bolts next of how we kind of structured the program and how we grouped it. So to make sure that we really had an intensive focus, we decided to focus on just our 7th grade. Usually you want around 10 to 12 students. So a lot of us will split into 2 groups. So we co-teach it. So a counselor, social worker, our school climate specialist, we will team up with a PE teacher. And generally we like to break into 2 groups and start to work on some of the challenge for that day. And we usually try to meet about twice a month during the PE class. One of our groups is early in the morning, and then our other group is generally early in the afternoon. But again, that's kind of how we structured it. And then the flow throughout the program, those first two, introductions and learning about the group, I've already spoken about that a little bit, but that authenticity, getting them invested in each other, not just us investing in them, but wanting them to invest in their classmates. It was amazing to me when we first started how many kids in their own class didn't know each other's names and didn't know, who had a pet, who came from where. So getting them to have those conversations and giving them a space to have those conversations, I think was super valuable, because as you move through the program, the challenges are meant to be harder and they're meant to require more teamwork, more maybe changing of roles, different things like that. So it's really important early on that you put in that time of learning about each other and past just simple names. Again, about who they are as a person. We also establish norms with each group. Ms. Williams, one of our PE teachers, is going to be talking about that in a little bit, but that's also been really valuable because you need those norms so that we all have rules to kind of play by. Communication styles, fostering resilience. I think we've talked about that a lot today, that the resilience is low right now. We're working to build that back up. Those communication styles, not everyone communicates the same way. I think that those both feed really nicely into critical thinking and being able to attack problems with different mindsets, different people coming together to work through things. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Ms. Williams, one of our very talented PE teachers here at Rogers Park.
Thanks, Tom. So I'm going to be talking about establishing norms, and establishing norms usually happens in the beginning of the process. It is a collaborative process. So the entire group gets together and they make decisions. So it's, as a PE teacher, as the counselor, as a social worker, and as the students, we all come together as a group and establish what we believe is important for the group, a set of guidelines for us to go by. Once we set these rules, it is non-negotiable and every member must follow it. That's why every member's input is a part of the decision. These are meant for everybody to have safety, both emotionally and physically. Everyone wants to be safe in this, through this journey, and we want everyone to feel respected and be able to share their opinions and feel like they are in a safe place. A quick thing that we do, we refer to these as a full value contract. And what we do is we have a simple 5-finger contract that we can go by. So, every time someone comes to the group, you have your hand with you. So you have a 5-finger contract. Thumb is for fun. Then we have the index finger, which is for responsibility. The middle finger is for respect. The ring finger is for commitment. And then your pinky is for safety. So kind of getting all of the basic, most important things. So if everyone's like, what should we be paying attention to? What should we be respecting? You have your 5-finger contract. But like I said, everybody is a part of this. So anybody that thinks that something is important, that we should make it a norm, that becomes the norm for the group. And we want to be open-minded. Every path can be different to get to the same goal. So we're really making sure that we are respectful of everybody's opinions and it's a safe place. In Project Adventure, we talk a lot about comfort zones. So we all live in our comfort zone. Everything we would choose to do, most likely would be in that comfort zone. So Project Adventure gets the students and even the staff thinking about moving out of that comfort zone. What happens? What are those zones? So you have your stretch zone where you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but you're still okay. And then you have your panic zone. And a lot of the activities that we make the students do, we refer to them as challenge by choice. So if kids are feeling like they're getting to that panic zone, they could say, hey, I need to take a step back. I'm not feeling comfortable right now. And they could take that step back, still offering the group, maybe they can help verbally, but not physically be a part of the challenge. But it's really about challenging them, making them go through those different comfort zones. And then afterwards, always breaking it down. There's always a debrief. There's always a part where we discuss it So not only are they going through the comfort zones, but then they're able to, let's talk about those. So individually and as a group, you're talking about the challenges you're facing, how you're overcoming them, how you're completing these challenges, and how you're working together. So establishing the norms is really important because everybody is on the same page. Everybody knows what is expected of them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Karina Chelso, who will talk about critical thinking.
Thank you, Dana. So through Project Adventure, it's been amazing to see, just like Tom Farrell was mentioning, that a lot of our students in September, we actually started in early October, didn't know the names of their peers in their classroom. And since September, it's been amazing to see the progress that they've made with each other and how much they've come together and worked through these challenges together. And through Project Adventure, our students have the opportunity to develop and build on their critical thinking skills beyond, the traditional teaching. They are putting those skills into practice while they're in Project Adventure. They're persevering through challenging tasks that we give them. They're analyzing situations. They're problem solving, all through communicating and working with each other, while respecting each other, respecting each other's opinions, input as they work through these tasks. We typically have them start tasks or complete the beginning of the first challenge with communicating with each other. They're able to talk, they're able to communicate, they're able to come up with strategies and how they are able to accomplish the task. And then once they accomplish that task, we have them do it without communicating with each other. And at the end, we always have time to process how they felt, whether they're in their comfort zone, stretch zone, what was difficult, what was challenging, what was easy. And almost always, obviously, they say that not being able to communicate was very challenging and made it more difficult to accomplish the task or to complete the task. So it allows them to see and recognize that communicating with each other is an important, is extremely important when navigating through like real life social conflict that they're having with their peers. So they're having, they're seeing it, it's happening, they're seeing, when they're communicating and talking through problems and analyzing what is the issue, identifying the problem becomes easier to tackle versus not communicating and not being able to work through the problem. So I will turn it over to Justin Fosher, one of our PE teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Chelso. I'm going to speak briefly on the training that we underwent last spring and kind of how it relates to how we have transitioned our program in with the students. Last spring, we went through a 2-day, unfortunately, we had very nice weather, 2-day training with a Project Adventure professional named Ian. And he kind of laid the groundwork for how we should attack and approach our rollout of this Project Adventure mindset with the students. Some main focuses for some of the main focal points of his presentation were the ideas of establishing, again, the norms that we talked about. We went through the process of forming, storming, and norming through our training, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. And then really focusing on the challenge by choice. So what the forming, storming, and norming was, like Mr. Farrell mentioned at the beginning, our activities started out just getting the basic, getting to know you, names, familiarizing yourself with people in the group, and kind of forming our group and getting to know each other and what we were working with. Through several of the challenges, we went through the storming phase. This is where the problem solving, maybe some of the disagreements that we see with our students, but also through our training would occur. And then we would revisit the norming stage. So after we had established the norms, we would revisit them after the forming, storming, and norming and kind of work through what the problems were, go through that problem solving and critical thinking element, and then progress on to either another attempt at the task or the challenge or to the next challenge or task. The challenge by choice was also mentioned. This was a very pivotal point with the project adventure. It relates to the choice to participate in a challenge. At times, the students do have the option to kind of take a turn out and watch from the side and then choose to join in later on. But also within certain tasks, they are given the choice to take different roles throughout the challenge. They could be an advisory role, maybe someone who is talking or problem solving from the outside while other people are doing the physical elements, but they have the choice in what aspect they want to participate throughout the challenge. And this can change from point to point within any specific task or challenge. Ian also worked us through a progression that started with very simple, as Mr. Farrell again mentioned, name games, getting to know you activities, to things that were a little more high risk, a little more high intensity. The stakes were raised and safety became a little bit more of a priority. So some of the things that we started out with were a game called Bump Bumpity Bump Bump Bump, which that in itself was a challenge for some of our trainees. We then progressed to activities like yurt circles, and then we went to higher challenge activities such as the King's Finger, A-frame, an activity called Islands, and an activity called the Whale Watch. All, as I said, got progressively more intense and more high risk, but safety and making sure that everyone was comfortable was the main priority. That from there, once we did our training, we have tried to instill a lot of the things that we were trained, or all of the things we were trained to do in with our students. And a big thing has been the debriefing process, again, revisiting the norms after we have had that storming process. And then we have an example here of some of our, we had an example of some.
I'm recognizing that the time is getting long, and
Okay.
I'm being respectful to the last group. So thank you, guys. Some of these are just some of the positive outcomes that have been spoken about by the teachers, and some of the things that we've been working on with a large contingency of students and large classes is the sizing, this class sizes, the scheduling with many crises coming up, and also the increase in SEL issues. We are planning to continue it for next year, and we're looking ways to address the scheduling. So thank you so much, and I'm sorry for us going over time. We get really excited about our stuff and love to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you folks from Rogers Park Middle School and Danbury. Terrific presentation, great information, and what an exciting program for your students and for your school. And I know your passion and excitement about sharing is contagious, and I encourage anybody listening who wants more information to reach out to Rogers Park, Dr. Christy Zaletta, principal, and to find out more about this terrific program. So thank you all. It's now my pleasure to hear from our high school spotlight group from Fairfield Ludlow High School in Fairfield, and Vanessa Montorsi, Director of Pupil Services and Counseling, will take it away and have her team share the wonderful DEI work that's going on at Fairfield Ludlow. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm going to start sharing my screen really quick. I'm going to give a quick shout out actually to Rogers Park Middle School. I'm a former phys ed teacher turned school counselor. So adventure-based learning is near and dear to my heart. So kudos to that middle school for implementing that program. I absolutely loved it. That's great. So thank you again, Bill. My name is Vanessa Montorsi. I'm the Director of Pupil Services and Counseling here at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I'm joined by three of my amazing colleagues, Lauren Marcello, who is a social studies teacher, Colleen Sousa, who is our social studies department chair, and Barry Rabin, who is one of our house principals. So throughout our presentation this afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit about how we got started with implementing DEI at FLHS, the work that we did this summer in order to prepare implementing PD to our staff, and activities that we implemented with our students, and where we're going with this initiative. Well, first, and Mr. Watson from Danbury talked a little bit about it as to what he's doing at his school. But just like all schools across the state, we come up with 3 goals every year. And we as an admin team, when we're looking at the 3 goals, we specifically put our number one goal as DEI. Not only did we feel that this was important as an admin team, but we received feedback from students, staff, and other stakeholders who wanted to support this initiative. I think it's really important to recognize that when talking about DEI, nobody has all the right answers. But if you approach this work with an open heart, an open mind, and open ears, willing to listen to one another without judgment, it really sets you on the path to succeed. There are going to be a variety of emotions when you talk about DEI. Some people are going to be a little nervous or scared. Some people are going to be excited. And some people may feel both emotions, and that's okay. So we want to validate that and understand that we're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're going to learn together. And that's why you can see Dr. Brene Brown's quote at the top of this slide. You know, I see you, I hear you. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to keep listening and asking questions. So how we started was last spring. Lauren and Colleen, who you will hear from shortly, brought this forward to us and wanting to address staff and student concerns about the need for actual visual action and intentional programming on a building level, unfortunately, following multiple incidents that occurred in Fairfield. And it didn't just occur at the high school level. There are incidents that occurred at the middle school and elementary schools as well. And you can see here, we actually had a student organized walkout, which was great. And then what happened was at the end of last summer, we had a small group of staff, about 30, who chose to read Liz Kleinrock's Start Here, Start Now book as an optional text. And those staff got together this summer. And our next presenter will talk just a little bit about that.
Hey everyone. So Colleen and I were sort of moved to get together a group of teachers after having a lot of individual conversations in our classrooms with our students who felt as though not enough was being done tangibly that they could see to address some of these incidents that had been plaguing our school community and our town community at large. So we initially had a group of teachers get together at the end of the spring. We sent just feelers out. Anyone that's interested in DEI work, you know, feel free to show up. And we had probably over 30 teachers who were really eager to be a part of the solution. And so we were able to meet over the summer as a smaller group in order to try to figure out our plan for the next year. So the first thing we recognized right away was the need to craft a DEI statement. We often expect our students to sort of know our values. And in this case, we didn't even have them articulated. So that seemed like a rational first step and a first place to start. And then we also were trying to figure out, you know, how do we make this an actionable plan that's going to reach the most amount of students possible? And what avenue did we want to pursue in order to make that a reality? We also recognized the overwhelming need for staff training and professional development because we know that our colleagues often shied away from some of these difficult conversations due to their uncomfortableness with some of these topics. So how do we prepare them to have those conversations? So our DEI statement was an effort of that first group of teachers that met over the summer. We drafted sort of a draft, and then we thought it was really important to get student feedback. So we have a really amazing student-led equity group here at Fairfield Ludlow High School called Youth for Equity. And we basically gave them the statement and said, we want you to sort of pick it apart, tell us what you think, make revisions, make additions. And through their feedback, you know, we sort of came up with this final product that we felt both students and staff, you know, would be receptive to. And so some of the things we realized over the summer was that, you know, we do have some existing structures that could lend itself to this work. I think as teachers, you know, often the feedback we get, you know, from PDs is sometimes, well, like, yeah, in theory, that's great, but how do I actually practically make this a reality in my classroom? And the great thing about Liz Kleinrock's book is we could tell staff to read it and they would see, you know, specific resources that are classroom ready, templates, lesson plans, all ready to go, so that there wasn't a lot of work on the teacher's part to sort of make that happen. We also, you know, got a lot of feedback from students about how consistency was the biggest issue. They said, I have some teachers who are really comfortable talking about these conversations and others who never mention a word. And how did we ensure that, as many teachers as possible were engaging in DEI work? And so we sort of came to the conclusion that we should utilize our advisory activity period. We have about 20 to 30 minutes built in to our homerooms, I think once a month. And we said, this is a time in which we can ensure that every homeroom, which is every student, is getting access to these lessons. And so we decided to spend a lot of the summer really planning out the advisory lessons for the first 3 months in coordination with faculty meetings, so that staff felt like they had enough time to prepare and get more comfortable or ask questions before they actually had to give the advisory lesson to students. We also were eager to work with the Anti-Defamation League. We had been using a lot of their lessons as part of our advisory lessons. So we wanted to set the goal for being a no place for hate school as well. My colleague Colleen is going to talk about also our need for an initial PD right out the gate at the start of this school year, so that staff knew that this was a huge priority for us moving forward.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, the announcements are going off. I'm Colleen. I'm going to just talk you through the first few months of school and how we sought to roll out our DEI plan. So in August, right before teachers came back, the entire Fairfield Public Schools admin team actually participated in equity training with CRAC as well as Drakes and Burton. And then they were able to, pass on that training to all of their respective buildings. But at Ludlow, we were really fortunate that our admin team worked with us as an equity committee to think about how we could take the PD that they received and translate it into our very first day back to school professional development so that we could set the tone for the school year. So our first day back, we worked together with that information to, first of all, establish a sense of urgency to encourage staff buy-in. We really wanted to show our data as well as some anecdotal evidence from the school counselors to make this work relevant and help everyone understand that this is real and it is affecting our students and we need to be doing better for them. So together on that first day of school, we did a land acknowledgement. We also did a definition of terms as well as reviewing that data, which was very successful. And then we moved into actually the delivery to the students through advisory. So we actually added some extra advisory periods. Lauren was mentioning, we had this already built into the framework of our schedule. So we added some extra advisory periods so that we had more contact time with students to be delivering these lessons. So through September and October, we really focused on names, identity, as well as reflection upon the past few school years that had such a tremendous amount of upheaval. So our very first lesson was about names and understanding the importance of names, pronunciations, pronouns. We had all students actually make their own name card with their pronouns so that all students would feel safe and comfortable really expressing their identity and who they were. We also did a group reflection where we talked about lessons that we can take from 2020 and 2021 and turn it into a more successful school year for all. Continued in October, we did some identity mapping where students talked about and thought about really parts of identity that are visible versus invisible and how that might impact the way that students relate to one another. We also, as we began this work, really were cognizant of checking in with students and staff about how these lessons were going. And one of the things that we recognized was that in 2 years of COVID school really prevented some of the relationships that had typically been built in homeroom from being built effectively. So we kind of slowed down a little bit and focused some of our advisory time over the next few weeks to relationship building so that we had a foundation there to have some of those more challenging conversations. But one thing that we did want to make sure that we did within the month of October is we had a special lesson for our 12th graders on costumes and cultural appropriation so we can make sure that they were all participating in their Halloween festivities responsibly and appropriately.
Thank you. So Colleen and I had the opportunity during the summer to work with Facing History, and we really wanted to bring some of their work into our school year. So what we had learned in the Equity and Justice workshop that they had offered over the summer, we connected Facing History to the November PD for the English and History departments. And they did a lesson with all of those teachers on fostering civil discourse in the classroom. How do we talk about issues that matter? And then that transitioned really well, particularly for those teachers, into our December advisory, where we introduced the ADL's No Place for Hate pledge. So we have an ADL committee that's made up of students, staff, and parents. Some of the students on the committee created a video for us, and then at the December advisory, all the students had the opportunity to sign the pledge, which we have all hanging up in one of the boards in the front of the building. From there, in January, we wanted to continue with that work. There's so much momentum that you lose kind of over that break, and then with us kind of having midterms that we hadn't had in a while, that, you know, we had an early release day on a Friday afternoon of a long weekend in January. And the hardest part is trying to find out when the best way and the best approaches to really engage teachers while still honoring the fact that we're all pretty exhausted. And this has been a lot this year. So we ended up in that afternoon giving teachers some options in terms of what they wanted to explore further. You know, at the end of the day, one of the things that, you know, we've talked about and we have to talk about as a faculty is that even amongst the four of us, we're four white women. So we can't speak for everybody's experience, or, you know, we have our own lens. So trying to bring that forward into some of the conversations is really important. So among the options we provided to teachers in January was to learn about color blindness, equity and grading practices, you know, the intersection between DEI and SEL, as we've talked about with all the schools today. And then that work about engaging in difficult conversations. And we brought in both some of the excerpts from Start Here, Start Now, and then also our work with Facing History. Shortly after that, we did an ADL activity on intentional acts of respect. All of the English classes brought their students to the auditorium. Students had to line up on a spectrum. You know, how respectful or disrespectful do you feel like our school is? And that led into our next advisory topic, where then we unpack them a little bit more in each of those advisories, homerooms. So then moving into February, Colleen and Lauren and, you know, some of the work that we had done over the summer was really to find content specific lessons that teachers could use in their classrooms. We don't want it to just exist in advisory, but really get into more of the day-to-day work that teachers and students are doing. So they helped to kind of hone a selection of options about ways that we can include Black voices and figures in our work during Black History Month. That brought us to March. And what we did at the beginning of this month, is we're now looking at the end of March, we had the students in their advisory look at school survey data that related to belonging and respect. And we had students and their teachers talk about what surprised them, what didn't surprise them. And this was the results of our students having been surveyed about the ways that they saw people being kind of treated fairly or singled out. And then a couple of weeks ago, we finally had kind of one of our our biggest activities, which is working with the ADL to do the No Place for Hate assembly. We did it with our 10th graders. We've done it in the past with our now 11th and 12th graders, but the 10th graders didn't do it last year because of COVID and our hybrid situation. We did it with them, and we hope to do that again next year with the 10th graders to kind of continue the cycle of having everyone involved. 10th graders had the assembly. We had panelists from our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who spoke to their experiences. And then we had breakout sessions where they each had an opportunity to speak with their homeroom group and plan for next steps for what we need to do as a school community.
Future plans, what we hope to do is obviously going to continue the work to be a No Place for Hate school, as Barry had just mentioned. And we're also going to include in that work the intentional acts of respect activity. I mean, this comes out of the book club related to Channel Kindness by Lady Gaga's Born This Way reporters that she started with her mother to help create a kinder and braver world. We are going to share that DEI statement that Lauren shared with you earlier with all stakeholders throughout our community, including our new DEI director who started this past November. We're going to reflect on the progress and set goals for next year as to how we want to improve and what else we'd like to embed into our current programming. And then we're hoping to look into restorative practices training specifically for our deans. And then really some of the advice that we had talked about that we thought would be helpful for you if you plan to implement DEI priorities at your school is to one, just acknowledge what you know, including your biases and recognizing that you're not an expert. None of us are. And just start your learning. And we've given you a bunch of great resources today, and they'll be on our the end of our PowerPoint as well. Definitely develop a vision and purpose to guide that work. I can tell you almost every single meeting I go to, when we're starting to plan for the future or develop a new program, this is the first thing that comes up. Does it support DEI work? Creating a calendar. This has been extremely helpful to us. It's almost like we've created a contract with ourselves, with our school, and for our students and teachers and staff, that we are going to engage in this work. It's on the calendar, and that calendar is actually sent to everybody, so everybody can see it, that we're going to be focusing on that. Creating a curriculum forward advisory. So we're going to continue to do that. We've created that already. So including that and aligning it to your vision and creating maybe a week by week development of that, and giving yourself flexibility to make changes. On earlier, say, we did make changes. We had to include relationship building. We felt that that was a really important part before diving in deeper. So allowing yourself that flexibility to make changes as needed. Certainly working with outside agencies and or your own student groups. There's nothing better than listening to your own students, because they live and breathe in your school every single day. So they know what they would like to see in the future. So we tapped into our diversity clubs, our GSA, ADL, and the Facing History, and some online resources too. Here's some resources and helpful materials for you. These are actual links. I can provide Bill a copy of this PowerPoint, and if anybody would like it, he can send it out to anybody, so you can have access to all of our work. But thank you so much for listening to our presentation. It was an honor and privilege to be here this afternoon, so thank you.
Thank you all from Fairfield Ludlow High School. And yes, we will be sharing recording of all the presentations and the PowerPoints and these terrific resources. So I just appreciate you so much and the work that you're doing and the terrific presentation you gave today. And to all of our school spotlight presenters, we're very grateful for the excellent work you're doing in your schools and for sharing all of your experiences and insights with us today. So I have just a few brief announcements before we close today's summit. And I will ask all in the audience, we'd love to hear from you. We have a brief survey that we'd like to get some feedback. This will help us with our planning as we move forward. So please copy down that link. I think it's also being shared in the chat, and let us know your thoughts about what you heard today. I also want to thank our corporate partners at CAS, the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence, Connecticut Army National Guard, Department of Transportation, Horace Mann, Jostens, Connecticut Lighting Centers, MCM Fundraising, and Pullman and Cumley LLC for helping to make this summit possible, and for their continuing support of professional learning opportunities for principals and for all educators in Connecticut. As I just mentioned, we've recorded this summit, and we'll be posting it on our CAS website, along with our repository of readings and resources to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that also includes recordings of our first and second summits and other important materials. You'll receive an email if you registered today. You'll receive an email when the recording of today's summit is available. And we hope you'll share the recording with folks who weren't able to attend, and use the recording and all the tools in the repository for your own professional learning and in your school communities. I want to thank again our partners, the Connecticut State Department of Education, SERC, and of course our CAS Equity Education Committee for all of their hard work in the planning, hosting, and promoting of this event today. And lastly, thank you to everyone who's still with us in the audience for being here today, listening to our speakers and presenters, and thank you for the work that you're doing in your schools to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our state, which we know, and here's the ultimate purpose for it all, we know will lead to the ultimate benefit of all of our students and our communities. So on behalf of all of us at the Connecticut Association of Schools, thank you. Have a great rest of your day and a great end of your week. Thank you. Bye-bye.